Long time no. You and the dog safety, I know.
How are you doing?
I feel fine. We look forward to the nice weather.
I'm gonna get out of here, Julie, for the time being.
Is that Mike, is?
I took a 3-mile walk, yeah.
When it's making
Yeah, yeah.
lights.
Walking tomorrow? Well, if we don't get out of here too late. We'll be. Oh, good deal.
It's for 6 months.
Yeah.
And it's to like rotate a tooth. My wisdom tooth is coming in. So.
Yeah, yeah, good for you.
Hi, everyone. I'm
Yeah.
12 again.
Good.
Good.
I'm gonna say, don't have him on, just a freshman.
Hey Dane, do me a favor, can you hear me okay?
Yes, I can.
I didn't hear a response to you. Did anybody hear that?
It said Dana's talking.
I know.
Yeah.
I can hear
I'm
you.
wondering if that thing. That's turned me off. Yeah.
You should have some feedback when you're doing that. It's picking up the voice, see that?
Mhm.
50. No, 51. Can you talk to this over there?
Yes, I can hear you.
Oh, good.
Perfect. We were having problems with the mic. Thank you, Dane.
Yep.
Okay, you want me to go ahead and get the live stream started?
Yeah, that'd be great. Thanks, Julie.
Sorry, technical difficulties. Everything got set up last minute today.
Oh, it's Brian. I'm like, you guys have too much space between you.
Right. Yeah, usually I straddle this guy, but I don't have to. So.
Hey, Rob. Good, how are you? Like I've seen a lot of this crowd lately.
The usual suspects, but I think that's the way they refer to it.
Okay, we are live on Facebook.
Ready to go? All right, welcome everyone. This is a meeting of the Village of Sherwood Hills Board of Trustees. Tonight is Tuesday, February 25th, 2025. The time is 7:01. Let's call the meeting to order. Julie, would you like to do the roll call?
President Ives,
Present.
Carol Barford here, Dietmar Bascooner,
Present.
Bob Falk,
Present.
Mark Lederer,
Here.
Shabna Lucky,
Present.
and Rob Stinky.
Present.
Okay, thanks for that, Julie. Item 3, approval of the agenda. Someone want to make a motion? Dietmar.
I'll move the agenda as presented.
Is there a second? Thank you, Bob. Ready to vote? All those in favor, please say aye or raise your hand. The agenda is approved. Item 4, statement of public notice. Julie, just want to confirm that the meeting was properly noticed.
It was.
Excellent. Procedures orientation, just want to remind folks that we are broadcasting this meeting on Facebook Live. Folks that are able to join us on Facebook Live, we're not able to, field any questions or answer anything contemporaneously. If folks have questions, follow-up comments, they should send those to Village Administrator Brian Mooney. Item 6, public comments. This is an opportunity for community members to speak to the board. No discussion or action may take place at this time, but trustees may ask clarifying questions only. Speakers may be limited to 3 minutes. Are there any public comments this evening?
Yes. My name's Gloria Whiting.
Hi, Gloria.
I just want to thank you all for coming out month in, month out and spending your time keeping our village running. I'm a resident here at 922 University Bay Drive. I live there with my husband, Paul. We both work for the university and we have 4 kids who are between the ages of 5 months and 12.
Wow.
And we also have my parents living with us. So we have a pretty full household of people. And in fall of 2023, I approached the village. I contacted Sharon Evelyn to ask if it might be possible for us to use the space that is in our attic to finish our attic so that it could be useful space. It's already, within our homes, within the walls of our home, but it's just not presently finished. There's exposed insulation and it's, really not usable. And I was told that I, under no condition, would be able to use that space in the attic. Not even to just finish it for the purpose of climate controlled safe storage, because of the kind of the formula that has been developed to govern, I guess, usable space within homes here in the village.
Floor area ratio.
Yes, thank you. Thank you, Bob, the floor area ratio. And at that point, the builder I was working with was a little bit incredulous because he's worked in southern Wisconsin for over 3 decades and said that in all of the municipalities in which he's worked, he's never encountered such a restrictive code. And I understand that like everything is done here very thoughtfully in the village, and I really appreciate the people who put the time into to thinking through how to develop that sort of a code. But it just struck me as a little bit ironic that I have this space inside my home that I'm not allowed to use. And in light of, there's a lot of push in the village, which I really appreciate, to kind of a greener solutions and thinking of how we could all do our part to be more efficient, to help confront the problems we have. And I thought, I could just tell my parents we're sort of at our max, you need to live in another house. We can, just use the space we have. But it would actually be a lot greener to just let us use the space that's already inside our home and to finish it, to like have this multi-generational family work. So I guess I also have, know of others who live in the village who have considered leaving the village or are considering leaving now because due to the floor area ratio, they're not able to make their homes work for their families. And these are people who have neighbors and relationships and really want to stay here. And so I just wanted to put that out there that it might be in the best interest of people who live here in the village to have a code that sort of more closely mirrors those of other municipalities, or maybe be willing under circumstances to be flexible with people who are asking for variances, to be able to pursue projects like the project that I'm doing. It's hard for me to see how, the finished attic negatively impacts any of my neighbors or anyone else who who I live with or who walks past my house or who, spends time in the village. But it would really meaningfully help my family and me to be able to do a project like that. So that was my public comment.
Gloria, thanks for sharing that. Mark?
I have a couple follow-up questions.
Okay.
Yeah, I just wanted, did you officially file for a building permit and get turned down, or you just discussed it with the staff and they said, we don't think this is gonna fly?
Yeah, she just told me that there was no way it would happen, so I didn't officially, she said, doing the floor area ratio, I don't know, I had like 180 square feet or something, and so the attic is more than 180 square feet, and it's, so she said, when she told me on kind of in no uncertain terms that there was no flexibility, I just kind of thought, well, I guess I just can't pursue this. So if it would be a productive thing for me to, move forward and do my part to ask for a variance, and then if there was like a chance that I get one, I'd be happy to do that. But yeah, I just stopped at her because I didn't understand there to be any flexibility.
Yeah, because just listening to your circumstances, I think a variance is the way to go. I can understand how it might not conform to the floor area ratio situation, but that's not to say that if you took it to the Board of Appeals, they might well give you a variance and it's taken care of. So I'm not sure who's heading up the Board of Variance at this I mean, the
FEMA
Board of
is-
Appeal.
FEMA is-
Oh,
Zoning Board
so
of Appeals.
yeah,
I
so
should let you
ZBA.
speak to
No,
that
it's
then
okay.
instead of
I
me,
don't have
but
any follow-up questions.
that would be my suggestion as the next step. And I don't even know, Julie, you'd have to tell me whether she needs to formally file and be turned down before she can make the appeal, or whether she can just go straight to the appeal.
I am not sure myself. I don't want to give false information because I don't deal with the zoning.
Could you just clarify, look into that and speak to her about it? Because I do think that under these circumstances, that's the way to go.
Thank you,
Can
Mark.
I add? So what she would have to prove is extreme hardship. And that's a very difficult standard. I think Dietmar could speak to it better than the rest of us, but you have to prove extreme hardship.
Yeah, you define extreme hardship.
Guys,
Please.
So-
Let's get off the rails.
yeah, so Gloria, feel free to follow up with me and we'll get you connected with Brian and our engineer, Brian Berquist as well, just to understand the situation better. And then we could, provide that advice from that point. Should you go through BZA? Is there something else? The Plan Commission has talked about FAR, the floor area ratios, and whether or not we need to make changes going forward. There's a long history there. I won't talk about it tonight because it'll really lengthen the meeting. But I'm really glad you raised the issue and we will follow up on it.
Okay,
Okay.
so I should just reach out to you.
Reach out to me, and Brian's gone this week, but we need to have a conversation about your specific situation. And I don't understand the math yet. I haven't seen the FAR calculations. And I didn't hear about it till this point. So I think that would be a good first step.
Yeah, it would definitely exceed the, FAR, the allowable.
Okay, well,
But
we'll
yeah,
we'll talk it through. Okay. All right. Are there other public comments this evening? Kathy?
I'm Kathy Brock, I'm on Dartmouth Road. Actually, I'm here to make some comments on a item that's on the agenda, and I think I can wait for that. But it occurred to me that, we have turkeys all over the place. Dartmouth Road and Swarthmore, the next road down. 5 or 6 or 8 or whatever days ago, there were 8 on Dartmouth Road and another 7 or 8 on Swarthmore. Sweetbriar. And so they come and go, but mostly come. And I try to scare them away because I've got a 10 or 15 foot circle of mud under my bird feeder now.
Oh, yeah, big
2
time.
bird feeders, 2 circles.
Yeah.
And I would think that it's not inconceivable that we could think about bird flu, which is the new hot topic. These are not wild animals. They look at you like this and say, I live here, lady, what do you do? And they chase children to kindergarten. So I would think that the turkeys in Shorewood could be managed somewhat to reduce the populations. I mean, I've seen other times I've driven by 25 or 30 turkeys, all in one big group. And, I own some land out west of Madison, and we have wild turkeys. And when you see one, it's mutual astonishment, and both jump and run, and the bird flies away because they're wild turkeys. These are not wild animals. So I'd like you to think about that, because I think that they're a pest, quite frankly.
Thanks, Kathy. Other-
Right, and if you wanted to speak to something that's on the agenda later, this is the only time you can do that, when the board is discussing later and we're able to check.
Pardon?
You said you wanted to speak to something that's on the agenda later.
Yeah.
You have to do that during the public comments, so if you wanted to
That's a
do
good
that
point.
now.
Julie, yeah.
Because once the board is discussing, it's not open for public comment unless it's part of the public hearing that you wanted to speak.
Did you talk
Well, we
about?
do have a town hall tonight specific to the floodplain issue, which
No,
keeps,
it's not. I and some others here came to talk about the committee.
Yep.
Assignments. That is on the agenda.
Yep.
But now is the time that you could speak to that.
Well, let me gather my thoughts. I can understand that the proposition, that you will discuss is interested in having the committees be, very representative of the whole village. And I think that's fine. Some of the committees, however, are composed, are sort of require their, a fair level of knowledge about the subject that the committee handles. For instance, the finance committee. I don't think that necessarily we would want the finance committee to be open to anybody that wants to be on it. I think they ought to be finance people so that they can make good budgets and good, whatever they do. I'm on the Parks Committee, and surprisingly enough, there's quite a level of knowledge that goes into taking care of the, what should I say, the wild places in the village. The Parks Committee is in charge or oversees the open areas in the village. We do not consider the swing sets and the volleyball courts to be our oversight. That probably would go with the recreation committee. The property is, but our main concern and interest is the care and tending of the more natural areas, which we are so fortunate to have, like the quarry and the post farm and some other places. And believe it or not, it takes a lot of knowledge to run those places. The committee that we have has a fair level of knowledge, one or another among us. And I think we've had a couple of additions to the committee in recent times, and both of them have asked to be on the committee and are interested in the parks and quite knowledgeable and getting more knowledgeable. But I think that if the committee is supposed to oversee the forester, which is part of the job description of the committee, then I think that you want to know and understand what the forester does. I mean, obviously. And it's not easy to come by. And I mean, what can I say? I own a state natural area that we've been doing restoration on for almost 30 years. And I know a fair amount of that stuff. I don't mind not being on the committee, but I would like to be replaced with somebody that has a lot of knowledge. There is no one that I am aware of that is asking to get on the committee.
Yeah, I think you're right, Kathy, for the Parks Committee. I think you're right.
Anyway.
All right, thanks for that. Are there other public comments this evening? Johnny?
John Fagley, Neil Road. I also want to speak to the committee structure. If you rotate people out of the committee every 2 years, you would end up, after 6 years having no one there, you would lose the institutional knowledge that makes it work. Like the Parks Committee, our committee, which is the waterfront, has engineers. We have people who know boats. We have people who know the front of the water. Right now, we have projects redoing all the anchors, the insides of them. We're constructing those. We're making them. We're dipping them. Who would do that? I mean, we aren't rotating the board. I don't think it's a good idea to rotate the committee. For instance, Mark Letter sits on the board. Mark, yeah, he's been here forever. And that really brings knowledge to the board that we wouldn't have if we didn't have him here. And he's over at the pool where he knows the ins and outs of that pool. Those are really important things that are hard to replace. You can't just pull somebody in and have them be able to get up to that level have the expertise to run that. And I think in my committee, it would fall apart, because it took a long time to find people who have those skills. There aren't that many people in a community like this who have those skills. Then you combine that with Mr. Funkhauser's plan. Mr. Funkhauser was a failed politician from Kansas City, left for ethical reasons. And now he's chosen by Sharon to come here. Sharon, of course, as you all know, just lost her last job because again, quote, it wasn't a good fit. And Mr. Funkhauser's plan, what he sells, is always a top-down kind of Elon Musk type of structure. We knew when we hired him what he sells. He doesn't sell grassroots committee structure. He sells a top-down structure, concentrating everything in a small number of people, which are the people on the board. And as I've said before, do you want that? Do you want more jobs? Do you want more tasks? I mean, you're pretty busy now. I look at the agenda tonight. It's not an easy agenda. I mean, you want to take on more? Because if the committees get denuded, who does that work? Do each of you step in, or does Terry have to do it? Terry has enough work. Or do you hire somebody else to do it? I mean, he couldn't run Kansas City, but he comes here and tells us how to run our community. I think there's a real problem with that. I think that for 100 years, we've run the village with a committee structure. It's been very effective. What it does is it spreads out decision-making to a wide part of the community. It invests people in the community with that decision-making. It gives them skin in the game, and it makes this a community because people know each other through those committees. Much like you on the board get to know each other, while maybe you didn't know each other before, it brings people together. I think it's an important part of this community. Parks, as Kathy mentioned, is a perfect example. There's knowledge that goes back 30 or 40 years. Probably none of us on the committees want to be here forever. All of us are looking for someone who can come up and can do what we do. I think we stay because we have a commitment to the village and we have a commitment to what we do, and we want to keep that for the village. The reason to stay is to do that, not because we love being there. It isn't because we love going down fixing anchor falls. It's just that somebody has to do it, and we got that job. But it's very important to think of that before you take away the committee structure, because what it does is I think it'll be a great loss to the community. And I think once you take it away, it would be really hard to rebuild that. It would be really hard to put it back together. And so I'd ask you to think long and hard about that. As Funkhauser said when he was here, he said, you can take what I tell you. You can take a little of it, some of it, all of it, or none of it. And I would suggest that he's gone, Sharon's gone. We probably walk away from a lot of that. We don't have to adopt his ideas, even though we paid for them. You can walk away. There's a time to fish or cut bait. I think it's time to cut bait with that. I think our structure works great. I think we need to keep it. I appreciate talking to you. Thank you very much.
Thanks, Johnny. I agree with you. We are lucky to have a community of over 100 volunteers that are passionate and experienced and dedicated. And certainly it's not my intent to screw that up, but we're going to talk about it more this evening. So thanks for sharing that. Marilyn.
Following up what colleague John Bakley said, I was hearing rumors about what was in the whole governance proposal. And I thought, no, that's not correct. And if there's folks talking about it, it will never make the village website. Well, I am very uneasy because the fact that it's getting such display by this board suggests to me that a lot of these board members think it's viable. And the fact that there's appears to be, let's try it for 6 months, makes me very uneasy because instead of bringing our village closer together and more efficient and giving more people volunteer opportunities, I think it's doing the opposite. First of all, I was shocked to see the elimination of the personnel committee. And that all the proposal is the authority is in our village administrator, advertised, to interview, to recommend, and then the board decide. That is not a good idea. The 10 years I served as chair of the personnel committee, during the 12 years I served as trustee, I looked and sought out people who had personnel expertise. We interviewed candidates, and a lot of times we helped persuade our administrator not to take certain steps that would not have been in the village interest. I think it's a bad idea, and I would not eliminate that personnel committee, invest all the power in a village administrator, and then have this very busy board just listen in a busy meeting like tonight. What do you recommend? Okay, we hired you, we pay you over 100,000 a year, whatever you say goes. It's a bad idea. Then going further, I am very pleased to have had an appointment to serve on the village finance committee. My term runs for 2 years, expires in 2026. Like John, I think you need long-term residents on these committees because it takes a lot of time to get the expertise you need to ask the important questions. And a lot of it may well be finance common sense. I don't have a degree in accounting, but I do have a law degree. I think that helps me learn things. And instead, what is being proposed, and again, I wouldn't be so nervous if it wasn't on a trial run, and it looks like I don't hear people hollering about it from the board. We then will no longer have a village finance committee made up of residents and 1 or 2 trustees. Now, unless I'm wrong, it looks like we're going to have a village advisory committee made up of residents, and then we would get to talk to the village policy committee made up of trustees, who would then get to talk to the village board. Let me tell you, it's difficult enough to be heard on a finance committee with 2 trustees. I just wouldn't waste my time if someone asked me to just get together with my neighbors and talk about finance. It's not worth my time, because it says to me, I'm even more not going to be heard than sometimes those of us on the finance committee feel we're not being heard now, even though we have a wonderful 2 trustees, but all our suggestions for agenda items never get on. We've had 3 meetings canceled, but nonetheless, we show up and we feel that we keep articulating things, we may be heard. So I just think this should be nipped in the bud. It just makes me very nervous, and it forces me now to pay attention at these board meetings now that it's on this trial run, when I would rather be allocating time.
Thanks, Marilyn. Just a clarifying comment. It's not on a trial run yet. we're still talking about it at the board level. But,
Okay.
I'm very happy that you're in the room where it happens. So on the finance committee. Other members of the public who want to speak. John, did I see your hand up? Okay,
Thank you.
all right. Anyone else want to speak? Bill?
I might have questions about the floodplain,
Okay,
but I haven't seen the map.
okay.
That is going to be a public hearing, so you can speak during that once we get
Yeah.
more information out there for you.
Okay.
Yeah, so we have a public hearing just for that item, Bill, so that works.
That's today, right?
Yep, that's coming up in a few minutes.
All right.
Any other public comments this evening? Going once? Going twice? Okay, thank you so much for that. Item 7, board matters, payment of bills. Mark, did you want to kick this off?
Yeah, I'll just go ahead and make the motion to approve the payment of bills in the amount of $4,062,198.88.
Is there a second? Dietmar,
I'll second that.
further discussion? All those in favor, please say aye or raise your hand. That motion is approved, carries. Item B, consent agenda. Anyone want to move the consent agenda? Dietmar,
Happy to move the consent agenda as presented.
is there a second? Carol,
I have one.
further discussion? Go ahead, Shabna.
I'd like to take item 6 off the consent agenda,
So B6 off the approval for
the
request.
village pool assessment.
Right. We don't have to amend the motion, do we? Julie,
It meets, I'm fine with it.
you're fine with it? Okay.
So we're gonna amend the motion to.
Approval of the consent agenda,
Items Roman numeral.
B6,
5.
right,
Okay,
1 through 5.
thank you.
And Carol, that was good with you as a second. Further discussion? All those in favor, please say aye or raise your hand. That motion carries. Shabna,
Well, I noticed that let me pull this over. The village pool assessment, this is a request for proposal. It does not include the upstairs. It seems like an item that we would have a discussion about, not something that I would put on a consent agenda. But the scope of this project is limited only to the first floor. And if we're gonna be doing renovation at that building, it seems to make sense for economies of scale purposes that you could just, if you're doing plumbing, why not do the plumbing of the upstairs or include it in the scope? Then coming a year later to do another RFP with another vendor to fix that space.
Mark, I thought there was something on there about second. Go ahead, Mark.
So phase 1, the last item, bullet point on phase 1, says develop opinions on accessibility and exterior improvements to the second floor of the pool building facility, contingent upon the village's plans for future community center space. So the intention is, well, the focus is on the first floor, driven by the desire of the membership of the pool to make improvements, particularly with the locker rooms and the like. We realize that it's a single building, and we should consider, as long as we have someone out there who has the expertise, to look at the second floor and particularly the accessibility issues, which would mean the elevator and the bathrooms particularly. We're not going to go too far on that score, though, because we don't know what the use of the second floor of the community center is. So we don't want to go in there and do a painstaking examination of all the second floor issues when it's not clear at all what the use will be and when the village will turn its attention to that area. So we're going to look at the first floor, driven by the interest of the membership of the pool, to renovate that space, and we will look at some issues with respect to the second floor. And the notion is that once this phase 1 portion is done, which is the really all involving the assessment of the space. There will be a report back to the pool committee, there'll be a report back to the board, and they'll say, here's the issues. And so before we proceed with phase 2, which is the design section, they'll have an opportunity for both the pool committee and the board to say, hey, here's the issues that have come up in the report and the assessment. Would you follow up on this? Would you follow up on that before we move on to the design?
So we get another kick at the can.
So I think we got it right, but yeah.
That was very helpful. Appreciate the clarification. I think it makes sense. And we should probably simultaneously have a conversation about the upstairs so that when we are at the design phase, we know what we want to do with that space.
Just be aware that there's no money in the CIP for the second floor. So while there is money set aside for design this year and for construction next year with respect to renovating that first floor, second floor would have to be a discussion. But I think first we have to figure out how that space would be used, because you can't renovate the space without knowing who the occupants are, in my opinion.
Shabnam, do you want to?
I will make a motion to approve the
Consent item agenda 6,
agenda item 6.
approval for request for proposal village pool assessment. And we need a second for that. Mark, thank you. Ready to vote? All those in favor, please say aye. That motion carries. The consent agenda is approved. Item C, new business resolutions and motions. Public hearing, ordinance L-2025-01, chapter 27, floodplain zoning. Repeal and recreate ordinance. We have an open public hearing ordinance. Julie, do we have to read that?
No, well, we need a motion to open the public hearing.
Dietmar?
I'm gonna make a motion to open the public hearing for L-2025-01, and the time is 7:35.
Thank you, Dietmar. Bob, that's a second. Appreciate that. And is Tim Stevie also with us from Town and Country?
He is on Zoom, yes.
Okay, awesome. All right, the public hearing is now open. Do we have any public questions or comments? Bill, I think you had a comment on this?
Jack, can I interrupt just for a point of information? Sorry to interrupt you. Typically in these types of situations, when we're dealing with a very complex new addition to the ordinances,
There's a presentation.
we hear from the
Yeah.
expert first,
Okay.
and then that informs both the board and the residents so that we can ask intelligent questions.
Thanks, Dave. That's helpful. Tim, how are you?
Good, yourself? Can you hear me all right?
Good. We can. Can you provide a nice overview for the board and for the folks in attendance?
Certainly can. This, as the motion says, there is the kind of item says here, it's a repeal and a recreation of the village's floodplain zoning ordinance. And the purpose of that is to keep the requirements of the ordinance in line with federal requirements for the village's continued participation in the National Flood Insurance Program, eligibility for that. The only real changes, I would say the major changes within the ordinance here from, last year or the last version to this version would be chiefly that the DNR and federal government here has come up with new maps. So your current ordinance cites maps that are soon to be outdated with regards to what the mapping is out there for both the floodplain itself and the flood storage district. The flood storage district map also is a new sort of addition to your ordinance here as well. It is just another section within there that would again cite the proper map for that particular thing. One thing that I think adds a little bit of context here, because certainly when you think of Shorewood Hills, or when a lot of people think of Shorewood Hills and you think of flooding, you're thinking sort of Garden Homes area and the impacts that's had in that particular location. However, I think it's important to note that when we're talking about floodplain and floodplain mapping, that is flooding from specifically natural bodies of water. And so the mapping itself, what you're looking at here on the screen, that is the flood storage district map, right? So when we're talking about floodplain mapping within the village of Shorewood Hills, your municipal boundary creeps over on some of the lakefront, Lake Mendota lake frontage lots, 3 inches to 3 feet in some locations. But that's where your boundary is for floodplain itself. So this is the map I have up here now. That's your flood storage district. And then I'll go ahead and share the kind of other FEMA map here, which shows the 1% chance flood, and then just the 5% chance flood, I believe, is there 0.2% chance flood as well. So that's kind of the changes. It's the changes to the purple areas, and the last map that I was showing, those red areas, those are the major changes to the ordinance as it sits in front of me. The reason for a full repeal and recreate rather than just changing the dates on the map in your current ordinance would be the DNR and the federal government really, really like it when the exact language of the ordinance is matched so that they can quickly verify, yes, this meets our requirements. There's no, deep dive that we have to do within this thing. And they've updated some terminology and just kind of general ways that they describe things. The effect is essentially the same, and they would prefer that it be fully repealed and recreated just so they can kind of continue verifying their stuff in an easy and verifiable way.
Thanks, Tim. Questions from board members? Mark?
Yeah, so Tim, how much discretion does the board have with respect to this ordinance? Because it sounds like it has to conform to the federal standards. And if we fail to pass this ordinance in its entirety, we'll be booted from the program. Is that kind of the situation we're in? So do we even have any flexibility to add to it, or basically this is it, it's got to be in this form, nothing less, nothing more? How's that stand?
I think you could go more restrictive on a number of items, such as, if you were building a new building where you were getting close to a floodplain or within the floodplain zone, or, generally making changes there, your building heights might be somewhat restricted by, being 2 instead of 1 foot over the floodplain elevation, maybe 2 feet over the floodplain elevation, and things of that nature. Here in Shorewood Hills, I don't know that you'd have a building proposal that would honestly fall into that category, because given the mapping that you've got here, all of your lakefront lots are going to be, lakefront setbacks, number one, and number two, it would be, I think that would essentially drive the majority of it right there. And I think most people would want to build, well above that floodplain elevation as a result. So there's not a whole lot of impact, I would say, that your changes could have there. And certainly you would have options to go more restrictive, but the federal requirements are the minimum. And yes, that would be the impact of, you just wouldn't be able to participate in the National Flood Insurance Program and offer that to residents, then that would be the impact as a result.
If down the road we decided that there was a change that we wanted to make, would that be a change in the ordinance, or could it be done as a variance? What would be the process?
There's a section within the ordinance itself that follows sort of a Board of Appeals. It sets up, the ordinance sets up a Board of Appeals option for, variance type stuff like that would potentially occur if that were to come up. Otherwise, yeah, of course, your always open to change your own ordinances that would just need to be resubmitted to the DNR and verified through their program.
Thank you.
Thanks, Mark.
Mhm.
Let's turn it to the public now. Members of the public, in the public hearing, you have any questions or comments?
Well,
Go ahead, Bill.
there you go. Thomas, THLMA.
Thank you.
Okay. Isn't this, flood map supposed to be sensitive to areas that will be inundated in the case of the 1% flood?
Did you hear that, Tim?
I did, yes. What I heard was, isn't this flood map supposed to be sensitive to areas that would be inundated within the 1% flood? And yes, however, the DNR and FEMA do not take into account storm sewer surcharges, which, when we're talking about Garden Homes and the University Ave area, that's essentially the cause there. We're not talking about a, natural water body overtopping its banks. In those cases, that's a storm sewer backup that can't get through the pipe quick enough to drain those areas.
I'm not sure I understood that.
Would you like him to read?
You don't, the map does not recognize areas like residential areas that might be affected by a 1% flood?
No, it does end up being a fairly complicated storm sewer modeling effort, I would say, in order to even, find what those areas would be. A really deep knowledge of, what the infrastructure is there. And it has not been part of the federal and DNR scope to take into account municipal infrastructure with regards to how they model this. So it's not within their, I would say it's not within their ability, number one. And it's not part of their scope to evaluate what does it look like when storm sewers back up. They really just look at lakes, streams, rivers, natural water bodies.
Doesn't this affect whether, what's mapped and what's not, affect whether people who are flooded could possibly be bought out?
I would say I'm less familiar with buyouts or anything of that nature, so I don't know how much commentary I can provide there. This particular ordinance does allow all village residents participation in purchasing of flood insurance through the National Flood Insurance Program. The types of floods that would be covered under that program, we have to go to that program and kind of refer to them in terms of what's covered, what's not covered, that sort of thing. But certainly, I wouldn't be able to comment on buyouts or anything like that.
Well, I think some of us know that is a Willow Creek watershed study, and they found, it was done with modeling and the whole works. And they found that certain areas of the village, in the case of a 1% flood, there can be as much as 3 feet underwater. And it seems to me, when they're in that situation, they should be eligible to participate in, or the village should be able to participate in programs that take these situations into account, and the village can decide, or whoever is willing to do it, whether the people who are involved, who get flooded, for example, are going to be allowed to decide whether they want to stay there or move out. We ought to do something about this. It seems
Just as a just as a point of clarification, the inclusion of the village in the National Flood Insurance Program applies to all village parcels, regardless of whether or not the floodplain touches your parcel or doesn't touch your parcel. Anything of that nature that does not dictate whether or not you go or are able to buy, National Flood Insurance Program flood insurance for your property. Certainly, the coverage and what would be covered, what wouldn't be covered under that, we need to refer to their policies to determine that, and to their people to make that determination. But that the actual mapping, what's on the flood insurance mapping here would not dictate your ability to or not to purchase that insurance.
Bill, did you have anything else you wanted to share or other questions you might have?
Well, I don't know what the implications of what he said. As some of you know, that there are large areas, some very important people live in areas that are, according to this expensive and study that was done, that although many parts of the village, many houses, properties are going to be inundated in the case of a 1% flood. The other people in the village are not going to be affected by it. And this creates a situation where the village is put in a situation where, okay, what are we going to do about these people that get flooded? Are we going to do anything about them? Or are we just going to say, well, that's luck. That's, what are you going to do about it?
Well, hopefully the 8-foot diameter storm water pipe that just went in along University Avenue is going to be somewhat helpful. It's not going to solve the issue, because the modeling showed that wouldn't solve the issue.
The model took that into account. It did take into account, and it said it wouldn't make any difference if the results reflected, took that into consideration when they made those predictions of how deep the water would get in various places.
Yeah.
Do you acknowledge that? I mean, did it?
I haven't looked at the model lately. We haven't studied that issue lately, but it was my recollection that before the pipe, you couldn't get an ambulance up University Avenue to the emergency room. Now they modeled that you can under similar storm events. That's the criteria they showed. It wasn't a criterion I chose. It was one that they used.
Well, under that criterion, it may be you can get it, but you still get water down there along, railroad tracks, down as far as, you're gonna get flooding worse than you had in 2018. Does anybody think that's not possible? Or we shouldn't think about that?
John, I think,
Mark. Yeah.
Tim, if I heard you correctly, really what's in front of the board right now is an ordinance update and change that recognize natural bodies of water and the flood plain associated with that. So although I hear you, that's not what's in front of the board right now. And the discussion is about the update and staying current with FEMA guidelines and DNR guidelines to accurately reflect the floodplain as they had modeled it for natural bodies of water. So I hear you, but it only pertains to natural bodies of water. I guess just to get the conversation back on track here.
Thanks, Timur. Okay. Are there other public comments this evening with respect to the public hearing and the floodplain zoning issue that Tim has described? No other comments. We'll close the public hearing. And then
How about I'll make a motion to close the
Oh,
public hearing.
Thank
now.
you. Thanks, Dietmar.
Time is 7:52.
Okay, thanks, Bob. And then we'll move to item D, discussion possible action ordinance L-2025-01. There's a recommended motion in Brian's notes to the agenda on completion of the public hearing process. Motion to waive the first reading of ordinance, this is first reading of ordinance L-2025-01, repealing and recreating chapter 27 floodplain zoning of the Village of Sherwood Hills Municipal Code. Does someone want to make that motion? Dietmar?
I'll make a motion.
Do we need to vote on the termination, the closing of the public hearing? We had motions, but no vote. Is motion sufficient to close the public hearing?
I think we have to vote on it. You're absolutely right.
So can we just back up?
Thanks, Mark.
Motion by Dietmar.
Thanks, Mark.
Second by Bob. Yeah,
Can I make a quick comment before we make that?
we're
vote?
gonna have discussion.
There's
before the
discussion.
vote.
Yep. Go ahead, Shabna.
I just wanted to ask, is your concern that certain parts of the village are not getting enough stormwater management?
The concern is, you asking me?
Yes.
The concern is, no, nothing, the city of Madison or the village is designed to cope with the 1% flood. In other words, it's something that if you're gonna, there's much storm management that they're gonna do by storing water upstream and dry storage and making bigger pipes or things like that. Whatever the city that said that, and if all this is that we talk about is put into effect, you know, the bigger pipe, there's going to be over 350 residences in the city of Madison that will have water up at least a foot at the house. They didn't say how many in the village would, because the village decided they didn't want to pay for this kind of stuff. But it shows, I mean, I got from the bill, the city engineering, their map of what they expect to be flooded in a 1% flood. And it's got a whole lot of I'll send you all the maps. I sent the maps to Sharon. She said she'd get them back, that she'd get them out to people. So maybe you've heard them, maybe you've seen them. But I'm talking to a few people here, I think they have no idea what kind of a risk there is for flooding.
Thanks for that. All right, so we have a motion to close the public hearing. Dietmar and Bob, we had discussion, ready to vote. All's in favor of closing the public hearing. That motion carries. And then item D, discussion possible action ordinance L-2025-01. I won't reread it again. Does someone want to make a motion? Dietmar.
I'll move. I'll make a motion. I'll make a motion. Upon completion of I'll make a motion to waive the first reading of ordinance L-2025-01, repealing and recreating chapter 27, floodplain zoning of the Village of Sherwood Hills Municipal Code.
Thank you, Dietmar. Is there a second? Rob? Thanks for that. Further discussion? Shabna?
I'm going to support this motion, but if there's anything in the language of the code that appears to be unfair or not correct towards somebody's property and you want to have a conversation about it, or not just the code, but the way the zoning and the stormwater management is, I'd be happy to sit down and talk about it. I think you took time to come to the board to raise your concerns, and it seems like we can have an ongoing discussion.
Thanks, Sean. Okay. Ready to vote?
Mark, just a question procedurally. This is the first reading. There will
Correct.
have to be two more readings.
Correct.
Which could be consolidated in a single session of the board.
Yeah.
Will this close out the public hearing though? So when we have a second reading and the third reading,
Yes,
it will just be a normal ordinance reading?
yes, that's correct.
Just to clarify.
Shabna?
If anybody in the public has a concern about the ordinance and could bring it to our attention before the next meeting, it helps for Brian to take it to the attorneys and look at it before, just as a heads up before the next meeting. If you could do that.
All right, we have a motion on the table, ready to vote. All those in favor of the motion, please say aye, raise your hand. That motion carries. Thanks, Tim. Appreciate you providing that overview and answering those questions. Appreciate your good work on this. Item C2, discussion possible action, police ad hoc committee, final recommendation. The report is in the packet. Carol, did you want to kick this off? Bob, you're also on that committee, correct?
I am.
Okay.
My,
And Shabnam, that's right. We got real power on that committee. But Carol, did you want to kick it off?
I will just give the barest summary, because I don't know if everybody looked in the packet who's here tonight. First of all, I'd like to thank the people on the committee, those already mentioned, as well as Nadeem Afghan, Jeremy Tunis. I think that's the whole committee. Also want to thank Chief Weitzel and Lieutenant Dodsworth, who attended most of the meetings, and the staff, who I think actually everybody on the staff at one point was either taking minutes or helping us get organized. So thanks to all of those folks. We looked at the problem of police recruitment and retention as part of the current national problem, both with retirements and with lack of new young people going into law enforcement, and then the difficulty all over the country of maintaining enough staff on police forces. The problem is exacerbated here in Wisconsin because of levy limits. It's very difficult for communities to find the money to keep police staff at the necessary levels. And as a result, many communities have gone to referendum for public safety funding. I forget the number last year, but now 2 more this spring. It's just a steady drumbeat. In Dane County, what we found is that our police officers are paid the very lowest. Our police officers are the lowest paid in Dane County. That means that the village is not competitive. So we looked at the framework of recommendations that was in a Department of Justice report on this very topic, police recruitment and retention. That was published in 2023, I believe. And Chief Weitzel has already been implementing a lot of the recommendations, some of the softer recommendations in that report, having to do with mentoring, having to do with a little bit of leeway in requirements on new recruits. But the basic thing, of course, is compensation. You know, if we're going to be competitive, we have to find a way to pay our police more. And the ad hoc committee didn't feel that we have enough familiarity with the very fine details of the village finances to make specific recommendations on how to make that funding, except we note, as I already noted, that municipalities are going to referendum. So we also make a recommendation of considering a K9 unit, a dog unit, because specialty units are a well established way of
recruiting and retaining talent. It provides opportunities for officers to learn new skills. It provides new modes of outreach in the community. And it can be funded based on capital budget rather than the tax levy. In other words, it can be funded through either borrowing or philanthropy, which is the case in some of communities around us. And we've modeled the possible, in the report, we talked a lot about K-9 unit in Middleton as a model. We think there needs to be increased outreach to our community about what the police do. And this is already underway. Bob has written a bunch of pieces for the bulletin. I don't know if you've seen them. Also, Chief Weitzel is, she's stepping up the communication having to do, especially with the monthly reports and some listening sessions that she's going to hold just for starters. So in closing, I'll mention that this is the year that we renegotiate the union contract for our police. So it's timely that we're thinking about how to make life better and how to compensate our police. And that's I'll just end it there.
Okay, Bob or Shabnam, did you have anything you wanted to add?
No. Carol summed it up nicely.
The motion is to accept final report of police retention and recruitment ad hoc committee. Carol, you mentioned that we're the lowest. We're lowest in the starting pay or we're lowest all the way across the board?
We're definitely lowest in starting pay. Some of the other pay levels are harder to compare, but we are definitely on the low end all the way through. It would take approximately, in very rough terms, about $200,000 more per year to bring us up to the level of compensation that Maple Bluff has, which is, as if you read the report, I've kind of used Maple Bluff as the nearest comparable. And so that's a fair amount of money.
That's significant.
Yeah.
I lost it. Shabnam, bail me out.
Well, Carol, I think it's so difficult to capture all these events that have taken place. And so the report does an outstanding job of doing that. As a next step, if this contract needs to be renewed in 2025, where do we go to figure out that what's the compensation amount and where we're going to get the money? Sure.
I think that's for us to talk about.
Yeah, that's the big question. I know the comment I was going to make is, as you mentioned, that the contract for the line officers is coming up.
Yes.
However, because our population is under 2,500, or that negotiation is not subject to arbitration. Once we get above 2,500, an arbitrator, a third-party arbitrator, makes decisions. We put our offer in, the officers put in the officers union puts in their offer, and an arbitrator decides. We're not at that threshold yet. Kind of right now, it's kind of a take it or leave it in terms of the negotiation. Bob, then Rob.
I would just add that, the reason that we looked into this was because we've had a tremendous amount of turnover in our police force. And that's really disruptive, not only to the coverage that we have, but it takes a lot of time, a lot of salary and expense. And we have holes in the police schedule. It's not good for morale. And so this is an effort to try to bring us up to some higher level. We're not constantly dealing with holes in our coverage of the village. So I just wanted to emphasize that this wasn't just an arbitrary effort to get more pay for police. It's really because we're a bidding crisis mode as we are across the country because of all the competition for officers. And hence some of the ideas like having a K-9 unit or some other things that can help attract and keep the people that we have. So we have this long-term continuity with our officers in the police force.
Rob?
Carol, thanks so much to the committee for putting together this report. It was really nice. I had one question about retention and overtime pay. So when positions go unfilled, then we have officers having to work a lot of extra hours. Did the committee look at, you might believe that having all these extra overtime hours could actually be quite costly to the village. Is that something that you guys looked at? Did that factor into your calculations and why it's-
No, we didn't take that data. I mean, officers get paid 1.5 times for overtime. So, and we've had a lot of overtime shifts, for, ever since I've been a trustee, I mean, for years. The police force has kind of hovered close to being full for at least 4 years. So there's always been some overtime going on. It was quite critical a couple of years ago, where the police force is pretty close to full complement right now. So no, we didn't model, how expensive it is to have a bunch of overtime versus to add another officer. But in terms of morale, I mean, working 12-hour shifts day after day after day, that's not good.
Right.
I had another
Yeah, go ahead.
follow-up comment and question. So with your recommendations, obviously the pay, I think, is something that the board will visit at some point later this year. The K-9 unit is kind of a low-hanging fruit, as well as the communication and community engagement. That seems like something that the board and their staff and Chief Weitzel are working on. As far as the K-9 unit, would it be appropriate to get the village moving on that? And could we make a motion to have the PHS committee look at the K-9 issue tonight, or will we have to wait for another meeting to do that?
We probably want to wait. That's my feel on it. The other thing I think we have to clear up for folks is we're not talking about a bite dog here.
That's right, not a bite dog, a sniffing dog.
Right, sniffing
Yeah.
dog, but if you could respond to Rob's
Yeah,
question.
so the way that it was left in the report is to request a proposal from Chief Weitzel for a K-9 that would have more of the costs laid out and the timeline for developing it so that she could give the data needed for people at PHS or the board to talk about it in a informed way.
It's coming our way sooner or later. Mark?
Yeah, I just want to ask a little more details about the contract negotiations.
Mm-hmm.
When would you expect those negotiations to start, and when would they conclude, and when would the terms of the negotiation, whatever they were, the settlement, be effective?
Be effective the beginning of 2026. As
Okay.
the current contract goes through the calendar year. So I believe it's supposed to happen starting August, September, something like that.
Okay.
Yeah.
I think it's really important here we be able to differentiate between what are capital costs and what are operating costs. We have very little flexibility with respect to our operating costs, but those things that can be capitalized, whether it's the K-9 unit, the drones, whatever, then I see we have more flexibility there. We're going to have a discussion later tonight about the village financial model, but clearly some of these issues are going to need to be modeled so that we understand the full impact of these, not only in a single year, like what does it do to us in 2026, but what happens to us in 27, 28, 29, particularly again with respect to the operating costs, which I'm quite concerned about. The other thing is we're going to have a discussion tonight about facilities management, right? Facilities project. And I think this also dovetails into that because there were substantial renovations of the police facility, right? The police part of this building. Again, that's a cost. That's an investment in policing in the village. And that needs to be brought in too. So Again, I don't want to jump ahead too much, talk about the financial model, but what we really need is to bring these pieces together to understand what the full impact is. And we need a process to do that. So the board, now if it's shifting out of the ad hoc committee, it's got to go someplace else. We'll need to figure out what are the priorities. And given those priorities, how it gets assigned to the committees or to the board taking it on itself. So.
Thanks, Mark. Shabna?
So we need money. There's going to be a negotiation by 4 months from now. I think you need to have the conversation now on where you're going to get this money. There's a train wreck coming pretty quick. So we have a negotiation by August starting. We need to know where we're going to get the money from and how much. So do we send it back to the ad hoc committee to investigate that? They don't have to. We don't have to do it. But we have to answer those questions.
The ad hoc committee for police retention and recruitment was operating under the assumption that the board, the finance committee, those bodies would be responsible for figuring out how much money it wants to spend and where to come up with the money. Yeah.
So can we send this to finance, but also I think we need some information from the chief on what rates do you believe your department staff would stay under? Give us a number, not saying that we agree to that number, but I just want to know what it is as a starting conversation.
I know Brian has put some thought into this initially. We just haven't chatted about what the specific plan is going to be. I'd be more comfortable waiting till he has a chance to come back. And maybe this is an item that he wants to add for the March agenda. And then we can discuss it more in depth at that point. But I'd like him to be part of that since he's going to be kind of he's kind of the lead negotiator on this as we move forward.
Do you think Brian could figure that out, go to finance so that the next time it comes to the board, we're in a better position with better information?
Yeah, I'd be happy to talk to Brian and figure out how we're going to coordinate this and how we're going to make sure. What I'm concerned about is that we don't just start off modeling without knowing what the board's priorities are.
Right.
Okay, what are the areas that you want to focus on? Get a better handle on what the costs are, make sure we understand what's operating and what's capital costs. And the timing, which Carol now has helped me with, that it's a 26 event. Right. So there are some information that we need to gather, but Brian and I can do that and figure out.
The model's
how
good.
we'd
We're
like
going to talk about the
proceed.
model. I think it's going to be a great tool, but we're going to talk about the model. So, all right.
So what are
One
we
other
gonna do?
question sorry.
Go ahead.
Is Steve Zock going to participate in
Steve
that?
is now retired.
Okay.
So I forget who
Who is this?
Steve Zock was
Labor attorney
our labor attorney
Oh, okay.
for many years.
Helped to negotiate the prior agreement,
Right.
the existing agreement.
The name of his associate is escaping me right now, but he's with Boardman and Clark, and we're continued to be engaged with Boardman and Clark on HR issues. But to your question, Shabnam,
I guess it's fine.
yeah, I'm not
We're
prepared to
all-
do anything
That's
tonight.
fine.
Yeah.
So Mark and Brian will figure out whether to come to us or to go to finance first and then come to us, and we're okay with that.
Well, we will come to the board because
Yeah.
whatever plan we decide on, we want the board's approval
Yeah.
and blessing of that path, whatever it is.
And Carol's going to be very involved in this from a personnel committee standpoint as well. Okay. All right. So for this item, there's a recommended motion to accept the final report of police retention and recruitment ad hoc committee. Does someone want to make that motion? Mark,
I'll take that option.
is there a second? Thank you, Bob. Further discussion? Ready to vote? All those in favor, please say aye. Raise your hand. That item is approved. Item 7C. 3, discussion possible action, committee assignments and term limits. In Brian's memo, I'll just read it for everyone. During the January village board meeting, a memo was provided by trustee Lupfi to consider reviewing the term limits of village committee members, balancing institutional knowledge with the addition of new ideas, perspectives, or what make local government committee participation most effective. Upon conclusion of last month's discussion, a request to include a list of all committee membership terms be brought forward within the February meeting to continue discussion. So that's in your packet. And Brian mentions here, terms of office are currently specified in the village ordinance. Current ordinances also specifies that the village president appoints members of committees and commissions. Chapter 2 of the village ordinance is included for reference. There's no recommended motion. If changes are recommended, this will need to follow ordinance revision processes. Shabnam, do you want to speak to this for starters, or?
Sure. I wrote it, so I think I should. It doesn't have a lot of support. I'm just going to read some notes that I wrote. So when I wrote this policy for committee assignments, and we're talking about committee assignments, not the governance and whether a committee exists or doesn't exist. This is purely about who gets to serve on which committee. So I thought I was drafting it in a way so that nobody would be injured. The policy would not have any negative implications today, because as everyone has said, no one wants to be on any committees anyways. So this would only come into use as a tool to resolve future conflict. So we have a roadmap for dispute resolution in the future. And I thought that it was a generous policy in the sense that no one would even have to, we wouldn't have to even address this until members had served a term of at least like 9 years. And if that wasn't generous enough, we could draft it so it's 15 years. I do think that term limits matter, even if it's just symbolic. It was in the news like 2 months ago where Ted Cruz was saying that there should be term limits on Congress. And when I heard that, I got so excited, not just because Congress has like a 2% approval rating, but because it meant there would be opportunities for a lot more people. If your congressional representative, Mark Pocan, does an outstanding job, but if that seat was limited to 6 years, then somebody else would run for it. I know John and I have both run for state assembly. John might be interested in being our congressional representative. And so just knowing that there's a limit lets people know that there could be an opportunity for them. I wouldn't run now, but if there was a term limit, it's something that it would be in my mind. Does that make sense? Regarding expertise, that's something else I heard tonight, that people have expertise, very specific expertise on these committees. That's very important. And not just expertise, but that they do things. So for example, as Johnny said, the Waterfront Committee doesn't just have meetings, they actually do work. And those committee members would have to want to do that work. That's something that can be included in a committee description. So I'm supportive of a transparent, clean, fair committee assignment policy that doesn't do any injury to anybody. If nobody wants to be on committees, then people would stay on those committees. But if there's somebody who's trying to get on a committee, it would be inappropriate for us to disregard, ignore, avoid, and hijack a committee for ourselves, because that just doesn't sound right. I don't think that's the right way to. I understand that I'm like working against my own self-interest. It's in my interest to not have this kind of a policy, but it's in the interest of fairness and it's in the interest of residents. I think there's dozens of people who want to serve on committees, but because it's not a transparent process, they avoid. No, am I wrong? Nobody wants to be on any committee. Nobody wants to be. So if nobody wants to be on any committee, then this wouldn't hurt anybody.
We have a list.
Yes, we're not allowed to comment though, so.
You can provide, at this point, you can provide comments via email. Yeah. But, Rob, you had a question?
I was just saying, we do have a list of the current applicants to the committees in the packet.
Right. And some,
It's like, it's 2 years old. So where's? the
some are
list for the last-
2025, some are
It's been
2025.
updated.
So, Shab, no, I appreciate, I appreciate the rationale and I appreciate what you're trying to do. You know, we changed the process 2 years ago. So it's only been 2 years and we created 3-year service windows for folks. We also went through and made sure that the committees were balanced in terms of institutional knowledge, geographic representation in the village, gender, you know, we just looked at really what's the balance? What does it look like? I think that's one task that I took on, and we set up this kind of 3-year rotation. Doesn't mean that you have to go off. What it means is whoever is the village president after April 1st is going to be in contact with each of the trustee chairs and talk about their committees and who's up, you know, and are they interested in continuing to serve? Are they, boy, they're really getting busy in their personal life and they really are looking for an option and, you know, an opportunity to get off the committee. You hear that sometimes. I think the village will be letting the community know that if you're interested in serving, you know, here's the link to the form and there's an opportunity for, you know, for you to express that interest. And then who's ever village president looks at that and goes, boy, so-and-so has served since such and such. You know, we may have to have a discussion to say, maybe it's time to do something else. Or, and I don't think we've really done this yet. Someone decides to go off for a year or two, and then maybe come back on to make an opportunity available for something, for someone else. The other thing is I listened during the public comment period. One of the notes I made is as committee veterans who have all this institutional knowledge, share that knowledge with the new folks that are coming in so that they're able to carry on some of the traditions. And I think that's really important. When, you know, when I've had staff work for me, it's like, yeah, you can leave, you know, you just got to train your replacement. And so I think that's something I think we can do because there is such a wealth of knowledge and perspective that we want that knowledge and perspective to continue. But just a couple of comments from my perspective. Other questions, comments, thoughts from board members? Bob.
Thank you. I read this and I think Shabnam's attempt here was to try to not restrict participation in committees, but maybe make it easier for people to get on committees, new residents, people that have interest. And my understanding is that right now, someone's on a committee, they can stay on that, they're just renewed every time. There's no limit really to how long someone can be on a committee. And I think that's very good because it establishes the institutional knowledge that's been mentioned, a lot of experience. On the other hand, if there's somebody that may have experience, they have to wait till somebody quits the committee. And I'm wondering if one approach might be, rather than a term limit, is what I would call a member reapplication. So just like board members get evaluated every term, we have to get reelected to be back on. Perhaps committee members could serve a term or 2 terms, whatever the length of time could be debated. But then at that point, they have to reapply to be on that committee. And then if there's someone on the list that specifically wants to be on that committee, now the door is open for that other person to be considered. And otherwise they're shut out. And then I think it's now if you have the incumbent there and you have this new person, then it seems to me it's up to the committee chair, who knows the most about the committee, to make a recommendation to the president of the board to make a choice to whether keep the incumbent or maybe go with a new person. And I don't think that as some of the wording here is, you can only serve 2 terms. You have to wait 1 year in between. I would rather see more continuity to establish that and keep that institutional knowledge, but at the same time, make it easier for people that have an interest to get into committees. And as has been mentioned, maybe a more graceful way for people to exit the committee if they want. We all, some people are very optimistic. They want to get on a committee and spend out a lot of time, and then they find that they don't have the time, aren't able to end the meetings. I think by having a renewal process might achieve both the goals of allowing new people in, retaining continuity, and then helping make it for a more graceful exit for people that might want to leave but are reluctant to. Those are my thoughts.
Thanks, Bob. I also wanted to mention, we had an email message from Roma. See Roma in the audience? I think there was one other. I didn't.
Linda Deniston.
Yes, yeah. So those folks, those comments are also in the packet. Other comments, thoughts, Carol?
So it's my understanding that most of the items that Bob just mentioned were included in the changes that we made a couple of years ago. There is an application process, there's an application form. The chairs are supposed to ask the members to fill out that form if their term is up, so that everything can be considered at the start of the new term year. I think we already have some of this going. I like Shabnam's suggestion that if you don't show up to 4 meetings in a row, that you are effectively resigned. That I think could be a useful thing. I guess I would note that it's what I found is that the set of people who have filled out the interest form is relatively small. And also on none of the committees that I have chaired are there residents coming and showing their interest by attending the meeting and listening and learning about what's going on. So I'm very grateful for all the folks who have served for a really long time and provide all of this institutional memory and expertise. And while I would love to see a lot of new blood, I would hesitate to implement the new policy as written. I think it would create a lot of vacancies.
Shabnam.
Sorry about my cough drop.
That's right.
We don't, and I think, well, let me try to say this. Sometimes we solve a problem and sometimes we solve an issue that's not a problem yet. So we had a short-term rental ordinance that we passed, not because we had all sorts of chaos and problems and we thought we have a problem, we need to address it, but we passed an ordinance to get ahead of it. And so this to me is a little bit more like that. Then give me more evidence of a problem before we can take any action. And sometimes we have problems that we don't solve. Like we need ADUs and we're a couple of years later. Sorry, apologize. I think the thought process should be how can we improve it? If the current form is not a good policy because a lens wasn't properly taken, this part of it's a little bit too restrictive, let's make it better. If 3 terms wasn't right, 4 terms is more fair, let's make it 4 terms. The absence of it speaks louder to say everything's just fine, there's no issue, everybody can get on any committee they want, feels to me like turning a blind eye. So if it's not a fair policy in its current form, I welcome emails, suggestions, let's make it better.
Mark? Yeah, I just want to support Carol's observation that if you want to be on a committee, you want to be on the board, come and attend the meetings.
Right.
I mean, when I first joined village governance on public health and safety, I came and attend meetings. I watched what they did. I listened to the arguments and so on. And I remember when I thought about running for the board, I sat in the audience, sometimes to meetings that ran till 11 o'clock. I got strange looks from the board, like, what are you here for? What are you doing? And it was just like, well, I'm interested in village government. I want to understand how the process works. I'm thinking about running for office. And that went on for multiple meetings. And I just think that that's the people that go through that process. Those are the people that I want to, fast lane them to get them involved in village government. But I do think it is kind of incumbent to people who are interested in village government to express that kind of interest. That's my 2 cents.
Thanks, Mark. Rob and then Shabnam.
Yeah, I have a question. Is there flexibility in the size of our committees? Maybe two,
You can go from 7 to 9.
Well,
Depends on the committee. Some are specified in our ordinances and some.
Right. Yeah, it's an amendment to the ordinance. I mean, it is enshrined in the ordinance, so there has to be a change.
Yeah, the reason I'm bringing that up is, Shabnam, thank you so much for putting this together. I think there's a lot of really great ideas that we should talk through. One of the big concerns is we have institutional knowledge from some of these longstanding members. We also have an interest in getting new people engaged and passing the torch on to the next generation. So clearly there's some committees where there is a lot of interest. I'm looking at rec right now. It seems like a lot of the people have wanted to be on rec. So is there some flexibility where we could increase the size of certain committees and thereby maintain the longer standing members while also allowing opportunities for new people to come in?
Thanks for that, Rob. Responses? Shabnam, you were next. Thoughts on that?
I mean, there's a policy that can get improved, but then there's the list of people who want to join committees. So you can scrap the policy, toss it. Now, how are we going to solve our issue? We got a list of people who want to be on committees.
Other thoughts? Mark?
And the other thing I would add too is that sometimes people who want to participate in committees are single issue. That their interest is limited to a single issue and they aren't interested in a full issue. And I would say to them, you don't have to be an official member of the committee to have influence. You come and attend the meeting, you express your point of view. Committees listen to that. And if you find that you're interested in the whole range of issues that the committee deals with, great. But if it's just a single issue, then come present your ideas, talk to the committee, and we'll see what can be done. But don't necessarily want to join the committee. So it's just an observation.
Shabnam?
That just doesn't sound right. That doesn't sound right. I get to decide and vet everybody and decide whether I think you're a single issue person or not, and whether, it just doesn't sound fair. It doesn't sound fair. I have to, I'm putting myself in the position of a resident. And if I want to join the pool committee, I have to think about how I can impress Mark, and that doesn't sound right. It doesn't feel right. It feels, I think you should have a process, an application, and it should not be subjective for anybody to say, I don't like this person. They might be too loud on my committee. In fact, I want the person who's loud because I'm going to have better dialogue. I'm going to have more robust conversation. I don't want to silence that voice. I want that voice. But we should have a fair process. I wouldn't have brought this if I wasn't aware of how many women left this board and how many people left committees because they didn't feel their voice mattered or they could get on a committee. I'm not looking for work to do. It was, hey, this is so unfair. Somebody tried to get on the plan commission for 10 years. That's not right. That's not fair. And it sounds like we are trying to justify, ignore, excuse that observation.
I'm just gonna say my reaction to this is if I'm lucky enough to be in a position to continue to work on committee assignments and term limits, this is one of the memos I'll be considering as I go through that process. And I think as a body, we just made some pretty significant changes 2 years ago.
You made the changes,
Yeah.
but what change in makeup did it result in?
I don't have the details in front of me. There was definitely a change in makeup, and we definitely had conversations with every single person. That was impacted by the changes to find out where they were at. Certainly, there was discussions with each committee chair about each committee. So I would expect that some of this is going to be factored in. It's not something I want to drop right now. But I think the process that we put in place is a good one. We're going to continue to look at the makeup. We're going to continue to look at the geographic distribution. We're going to continue to try to balance out folks with lots of institutional memory and new folks that are hungry and engaged and want to participate in village governance. That's the balance. That's the balance I'm going to continue to look for if I'm in that position. Dietmar.
I think I'll just share my thoughts here and try to keep it under a couple of minutes. I think there's something to be said about throwing your hat in the ring and actually getting onto the ride and sort of, you paid your ticket, you bought your ticket to get in, and you need to be assured a process by which you can get onto a committee if you have interest in that. I get it, interest can be shown on many different levels, but I'll be honest, I guess I wasn't tracking. For example, I'm currently the chair of the Recreation Committee, and there are times where I had to drum up business to get folks to join the Recreation Committee, only to really realize now that there's a potential of 4 individuals that are now on the waiting list to join the Recreation Committee. So complete changing terms. Marilyn, I'm not going to address you specifically here, but I see Marilyn has put her hat in the ring to join either the Personnel Committee or the Plan Commission or the Black Hawk Liaison Committee. And it goes back all the way to 2023. I think there needs to be a process by which that is honored. Otherwise, it's futile, right? Why even sign up? So that discourages people and discourages participation.
In that case, if I could just jump in, we had a conversation about these opportunities and got you on finance, but go ahead.
Yeah.
No, but I was never permitted on the Black Hawk Liaison Committee, even though I had experience. So there's a lot of problems there, and Dietmar is highlighting.
So I I'm not gonna sit here and solve this issue tonight, but I want, not only as an elected person, but also, if I'm not elected, an ability to participate. And I want that process to be fair and transparent. And at times, you know, I remember talking to Dave early on, or even not David Sykes as well. How do I get involved when we first moved into the village? And, you know, I sort of, it waxed and waned, and there's greater interest in some years and less interest, and nothing ever really materialized until a vacancy showed up. And it was just like this surprise, wow, a vacancy showed up. Great, wonderful, I can get involved. I think we want to pay attention to this. We need to pay attention to this. There has to be a transparent process by which I can say, I would like to participate as a constituent. I want to make recommendations that could drive forward policies. And I realize that participation can happen in different ways. It can happen by attending the committee meetings. It could happen by becoming a committee member. All those things are fair. But I truly think that as part of this process, we need to make it, we need to create an ability to get onto committees. What that looks like yet, you know, John and I need to put forward a vehicle to do that, whether that's perfect, not perfect. I'm not going to sit here and say that, but I think we want people involved. So those are I'm droned on more than 2 minutes, so.
Thanks, Dietmar.
It's enough.
Other comments, thoughts on this issue?
I don't think we're not voting on anything, right? If anybody has suggestions, how to make it fairer, how to make it nicer, send them over. Let's make it better. We think.
No, that's a good point. And we heard quite a bit of public testimony in this area tonight, so that I think that's gonna be helpful. All right, ready to move on? Okay. I'm gonna go find some water, Mark. Do you want to kick off item 4? Discussion possible action, village financial model?
Sure. So last fall, when we were doing the CIP process and reviewing the CIP, I talked to Brian and we opted to submit for the board's consideration purchasing a financial model, a financial plan out of the small cap budget. And that was approved, and an allocation was made of $15,000 to purchase a financial management plan / model. And in the last month or two, Julie and I and Brian have met with 3 vendors, consultants about this. And we've heard their pitch and we've gone through the process, and we have unanimously selected Ehlers, EHLERS, which is a major Wisconsin consulting firm, as the best vendor for us. Theirs is not the most expensive option, but it's not the cheapest option either. In any event, they have proposed to us a fee of $18,000 to work with us to develop the financial plan, the initial financial plan. And Julie, again, Brian and I have recommended that we do that, but because it's $3,000 over what we allocated in the CIP, we're coming back to the board and asking for the board's authorization to spend that $3,000 out of the contingency fund. We have contingency funds in administration in order to make that, to accept that bid. Julie, I don't know if you want to add anything else to that. I will say Julie and Brian were good sports about this. They were fairly skeptical, I think. Is that right? The right words? Yeah, skeptical. That is the right word about this. You know, is this another planning exercise? Is this something that we're going to be spending a lot of time on, and at the end of the day, it's going to sit on a shelf and it's not going to be particularly useful and so on. But I really think that both of them have come is enthusiastic crossing the line with you, or maybe it is, but they're both very supportive now of going through the process because I think they understand now, as I do, what the benefits of this plan is. Because right now, what we're doing is we're doing a 1-year budget and we're doing a 5-year capital plan, which means we're not doing any financial planning for years 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, and on. And that, to me, that's a serious problem, particularly when we make decisions about funding. Like if we add $200,000 to compensation for the police in order to shore up the policing department. Well, that's not just a one-time expenditure. We may be able to find a way to shoehorn it into the 2026 budget, but what's it going to do to 27? What's it going to do to 28? What are the long-term consequences? So this plan has a benefit. The major benefit is that it's now over a much longer time horizon than what we've done previously. Furthermore, it is going to be fully integrated and comprehensive, which means the TIDs, the tax incentive districts, which don't dissolve. The earliest one, I think, is 2030 or 2031. They're now going to be part of our financial planning because they now will be within the scope of this 10-year model. Other things that are of great interest to us, utilities. We have utility funds, we have 3 utilities, but we don't really do much in the way of planning for utilities. And I would say, and Julie, if I'm right about this, we don't have a lot of experience with utilities, how to manage utilities finances. And that's, again, one of the advantages of bringing elders in. It's not just the model, their Excel workbook with the sheets in it, but it's the knowledge they have because of so many of the communities they serve, some the same size as us, in dealing with these kinds of issues. So it's not just a pure technical financial process, it's a consultative process. And I think that adds a lot of value. So that's my pitch.
Dietmar, then Shabna.
Yeah, I guess I'd actually like to get this motion on the table, just so we can make hay while the sun shines here. So I'll move the motion to approve the village administrator to utilize the small cap contingency to cover the additional $3,000 cost of the financial model software contract. And if this receives a second, I'd like to at least add a small comment.
Second.
Second.
Thank you.
Thanks, Shabna.
Just my minor comment to this, Mark, I don't think you need to pitch this to me anymore. And I think it's important enough for the residents to listen in on this, to really understand how we as a small municipality need to look at financial ways and means that, which was a way of the past, really look forward, where things are multimodal, multi-complex, and where we can actually project things. So I've long supported this. I think the first time that you brought this to the board last year, said, why haven't we pursued this? I mean, we're already behind, it feels like. You have my full support in all of this. And I truly do think that this is really, really meaningful as we look ahead and operationally as a village for the next 5, 10-year, 15-year term to start modeling things out. So I don't need to say anymore.
Thank you.
Shabna. Here we go. Oh, you just sucked it. Okay, Carol?
So I am entirely supportive of the financial modeling, and indeed it's in the CIP. I'm just wondering if you can narrate for us what it is about the Ellers option that warrants the extra $3,000.
Okay. Well, as I say, there were 2 other vendors we talked to, and one was more expensive and one was less. So they aren't necessarily out of the market. But I think what really convinced me was a couple of things. One, they showed us, we went through a PowerPoint with them of a presentation they'd made to another Wisconsin municipality. And this was not a pitch for services. This was the actual presentation of the financial plan that they had put together with that municipality. And I was really impressed by its understandability, the fact that it was, municipal finance is complicated. most of us grew up in like the corporate world and we understand corporate financial statements. But municipal finance statements, fund accounting is quite different. But they really had honed it down to the point where they were presenting something that I felt a board and just as importantly, the community could sit in and understand what was going on. So that was a big thing for me. The other thing that was a very big thing for me was because they consult with municipalities on so many issues like the utilities that I was mentioning earlier, they can bring some expertise that we don't have. We're a small village with a small staff. Brian Mooney would say, you know, he's not the financial expert. That's not, he's got a good bit of financial knowledge, but Ellers brings a lot to the table in terms of being answer questions that the staff will have as they go through the process. Some of the other firms we talked to Baker Tilly. That solution didn't really appeal to me, though I appreciate their product. We also talked to Baird, who's our financial investment manager. But their approach was more focusing a little bit on financing. And financing is important, and managing our debt is important, but managing our operations are equally important. And I just felt that Ellers had a better handle on the full scope of all the activities that go on in the village. So we're in a better position to understand and provide insight into as we go through the process of trying to put the plan together. So that was my thinking on it.
Jonah?
Well, you've really raised the bar. I'm looking for a fantastic presentation this year.
So
Knocking it out of the ballpark.
what I'm hoping for.
I had a follow-up. Is this a one-time expense? Is this?
It is and it isn't. It, in the sense that they produce these models for lots of communities, basically off the same template, and then modify it to conform to if a village has TIDs, they know they need to do that modeling. If it has utilities, if they have special funds, whatever. So in that sense, there's a customization going on. So they need to customize their template for this village. And that's why the price is the 18,000 that we're looking at, because of the initial upfront cost to create the model off the template. They need to go and they populate the model. They don't expect the staff to be able to go in there and put in all the numbers like the historical data, the projections for the TIDs and so on. That's all on Ellers. So they've already requested all our financial documents essentially, so that they can go through them and pull out of those documents the things they need in order to run the model. So that's the upfront cost. In subsequent years, we will want to update this model. It will become outdated because this model will be driven by assumptions, like for instance, a cost of inflation rate in the future years. And let's say we start off the model, we tell them we're comfortable with 2.5% right now. And they run the financial model on that basis. But next year, we find out inflation is running now 4%. And as a result, we have serious doubts about the financial plan at that point. So at that point, the model needs to be updated. So my expectation is there'll be an annual update of the model, first and foremost to replace the budgeted 2025 numbers with 2025 actuals, right? To lay in the 26 through 30 CIP, when the initial model will have the 25 to 29. So there will be an update required just to do that.
So it's like a maintenance fee?
But that's that, if you will, consider it maintenance. So that's one fee. And then on top of that, if the update reveals substantial changes in the model, that's to say our assumptions change, and now we're not looking at 2% inflation, we're looking at 4% inflation. So we see the result on the model and we go, whoa, that's very different from last year. That changes our thinking about things. Then at that point, we may need to go back to Ellers and say, we need to run some new scenarios. We need to see what 4% inflation looks like rather than 2%. We just did a financing of $10 million in order to renovate these facilities. We thought the interest rate on that would be 5%. It turned out to be 7%. What does that additional cost do to us? So there's a two-part thing. There's a routine kind of maintenance that goes on. And then if the results are dramatically different from the prior financial plan, we may have to do scenarios and tuning of it, which will increase the cost.
Carol?
I guess I'm surprised that there's not a parameter box in this model that anybody using it at the village can go in and say, change the inflation rate, do 2.5, do 4.0. It kind of begs the question, what?
Oh, no, that part they can do. That's easy.
Okay.
Okay, that's
Okay.
not the hard part. The hard part is when you push the button and you make it 4% and 2%, okay, it ripples through the projections. All the projections now change. Somebody has to sit down and look at those new projections and analyze what the consequences are relative to the plan that we have in place. Okay, and what will probably come out of that is not, we've got to do something. We're going to have to cut back on some operating expenses. If we're going to have to pay 4% for the next 5 years on salaries and the like, 4% increases, we can't afford that. We're going to have to do a referendum to raise the levy limit. Yeah, sorry.
But do we need Ellers to tell us that? I mean,
You don't necessarily need them to tell us, and that's why I spoke to them about trying to negotiate a fixed price for the maintenance contract, if you will. But it was unclear whether we would need it or not. I mean, we need it with respect to just doing some of the simple updates, which are not expensive. But to the extent we will actually need their consulting services and their expertise in updating the model in future years, I don't know, because I don't know how significant the changes will be. And whether those changes are some things that we feel comfortable, that we have a handle on, and we know what the path forward is, or whether we feel like it's something like, oh, it's a problem in the utility. We're not sure what we're supposed to do with the utility in this particular circumstances. Do we need to do a rate case? What would the rate case involve? And so we don't have that kind of expertise. So it depends on the nature of what the update produces. We'll have to evaluate it and make a determination. Do we need additional consulting? Do we need additional help? Or are we good with just a simple update and put in the actuals, replace update the assumptions, and we're good to go? So that's kind of where we are. So it is quite sophisticated. One thing I do want to also add, just to correct something, is that we don't actually push the buttons on this. This is their model. It's not something that we buy and install on our servers or on our PCs. It actually resides on their servers. It's their proprietary model. Okay. So if we want to know what the effective change 2 to 4% is, we got to go ask them, say, push the button. Now that'll take them all of 2 seconds to do that. And they'll do a printout and they'll send it to us and we'll evaluate it. But it's not our model. Okay. You understand.
this is not what I understood before. It sounds like we're buying modeling services. We're not.
We are,
We're not buying our own.
at least initially, in terms of, but I see that pros and cons to that. Okay. There isn't a lot of modeling experience in the village. Okay. So for us to build a model would be horrendously expensive and difficult. And even if we were to buy one off the top of the shelf, to really understand all the interconnections of the financial statements, how things ripple through at their kind of level, that's not a simple thing. So part of me says I don't want to be hooked to them for a long period of time necessarily. I don't want to pay for things that we don't need. On the other hand, I recognize that as this is our first modeling experience, we will really benefit from their long experience with so many communities that they've worked for. So, it may be I'll be back here and I won't be back here. My successor will be back here in a couple of years and say, okay, we've got enough experience. We can do this on our own now. We can cut the cord. I don't know. That's something that the village can look at down the road.
Shobna?
Uh, is there a timeline where we need to approve this tonight? I'm supportive, but I think Carol makes some good points. And I'm wondering if we could, if it's helpful to maybe have Elhers, if I pronounce it correctly, provide you the demo that it seems like they provided to you and Julie to the finance committee so that they could just take another look at it. I don't want to delay. I'm not saying this to delay, but I'm starting to wonder if I'm convinced that we need this in one look. If there's no deadline for finance to look through it, might be worth it.
Well, I don't want the board to feel any pressure about this, but the reality is we've already talked tonight about, well, what about these police costs? What about the 200,000? What's the process? Okay? It will take them time to digest our financial statements and all these documents. They're going to want to review the strategic plan. They're going to want to review the capital investment plan and so on. So it's going to take time to review the documents. It's going to take time to load them up. So if you want to do that, if that's the board decision, then that's up to the board. But I guess I just caution about pushing this decision out. As I said, Brian, Julie, and I have looked at this. We've looked at several firms. This one is clearly the best. I went back to Brian on numerous occasions. I did not negotiate this contract. Brian did. I left it to him, but I gave him all my comments. A lot of the concerns that have been raised tonight and that I've raised, Brian has raised with them. So I just don't think you're going to be a lot smarter in 30 days than we are right now, and it will push back the timeline. But if that's the board decision, then I'm fine with it. You just recognize it will take us longer to get to where we need to be.
I'm gonna care. Well, I'm mindful of the time too. We're a little after 9 o'clock and I really was aiming for 10 o'clock tonight. So just for everyone's benefit, Carol?
Yeah, thank you. It sounds like this is customary and that you guys have done the due diligence. So I don't want to hold this up personally. I just thought that since this new in the village, that everybody should understand for the record what we're buying. We're buying modeling services and, so be it.
Shobna? There's a motion on the table.
Because we are so strapped for cash, I think it's not, and if it's not going to harm anybody, if there's no injury, I don't think it's a bad idea to have them talk to finance, because I think people in finance are incredibly smart and we should see what we're really getting out of this. At the end of the day, they're not going to find money when we don't have it. I just think it's worth having finance take a look to see, because we've had other RFPs. We worked with FGMA. We've walked away from so many consultants saying, I kind of knew that was it worth $20,000, $30,000, $40,000 just for an assurance. You might come back a month from now and say, finance says we can actually do this ourselves. And if they don't, then you sign the deal and you move forward the next day.
Because I think the board understands, right? We have some pressing financial issues. Due diligence has been done, I believe. I think all the issues have been put on the table. And I think it's just up to the board to decide, do you want to proceed or do you want to do additional due diligence? I have no more due diligence to do. I don't know that Brian or Julie does, so I think it'll be an issue for the board needs to do its due diligence.
Right.
And by all means, go right ahead.
Yeah, I mean, Julie?
For what it's worth, my 2 cents.
Yeah.
I was not excited about this, to be honest. I thought, do we need this? Is it gonna be productive? Is it really gonna help? I went in doubting and I was pulled in toward the end, so, but I ended up seeing what each of the vendors presented. One of them had basically we would have had the tool to plug the numbers in, but it wasn't what we needed. It was something that was it It was not set up for us. It wasn't what we needed and would not have provided what we needed. Another one had information that's not that much different than what we already provide. It's more kind of presentation type things. The thing with Ellers is, like Mark said, all the different, everything was tied together. But the thing that impressed me with Ellers is every other one, the other two vendors specified, we're not going to tell you what to do. You just put your numbers in and you can see what happens. So Ellers pointed out that they stay current about, like they have specialists in all these different areas. So they're aware of any changes in laws, in limits, for things like kids and utilities and stuff that it's hard for staff to stay up on because we are not specialists in that. So that was reflected, and they said, if things do look off kilter, we will make recommendations. We will tell you what other communities have done successfully or unsuccessfully. And to me, that's what flipped it, because we have a small staff. We don't have people that can go to all this training and stay current on all this stuff. And that alone right there was worth it to me, because it gave me the security that we weren't making decisions when we didn't have all the information. They were current of all these current updates. And I think we need that in the village.
Should have been brought in finance.
Can I?
Thanks,
can I-
Julie.
Okay, last compromise. We gotta move. Joe's gotta go on. How about this? We approve tonight with a small caveat that Ellers will give a demo to finance and you guys could proceed with the contract, or you can back out if you guys all decide not to do it. Is that a compromise? Let's approve tonight, but allow Ellers to give a presentation to finance.
Yeah,
This approval is just for the additional 3,000. It's not for the contract in general.
right.
Never mind.
This was
Approve
budgeted.
tonight.
This was budgeted.
Okay, never mind. I approve. Never mind.
I mean, I can't speak for the chair for finance. I would think that once we get into it, there'll be an opportunity for the finance committee to weigh in, to view, to ask questions, to comment as they would on any other issue. And I'm anxious to see it as a board. And I think the public's interested to see it. I think it could be a really good tool. We're potentially facing some pretty significant financial moves in the next few years. There's pressures in a lot of different ways. And for us to do that in real time and to factor in the way that Mark has presented, I think it's gonna be a great tool for us to make decisions.
Okay.
If it gets to the point where, okay, we got it, we're all experts now, then we may bail out of it at some point, but I don't see that. The next 5 years is gonna be, we have to bridge now till 2030. And that's gonna be a delicate dance, and I think this is gonna help us do that. Bob and then Mark.
I just would quickly say that we do have two people from finance that are sitting here at the table, and so I'm guessing finance is very much up to date and has heard this, gone through this as well, so.
No,
But
we
we
haven't.
haven't.
No, the due diligence was done, the whole investigation was Brian, myself and Julie.
Okay,
It was a finance, we didn't make it a finance department project. And I just want to add one other thing, is if the board decides not to go with Ellers, I would not recommend either of the two other vendors. And frankly, I don't know that there is anybody else out there that I would want to talk to. So if it's not Ellers, just speaking for myself, we're on our own.
I appreciate that, Mark. We've got a motion. We've had a lot of discussion. We've had a lot of commentary. I appreciate it. Some of this is, I'm trusting the folks that are living and breathing and dreaming it. And, Brian's not here, but I know he was very engaged in this. I think Julie's comments, were really helpful for me. They see the value. It's $3,000 at the end of the day that we're adding on. So we've got a motion ready to vote on this. All those in favor, please say aye, raise your hand. Okay, that motion carries. All right, good discussion though. All right, well, this will be a quick one. Item discussion of possible action, village facilities project. So, as you know, a kind of work group, Bob and I and Shabdan have been working with Brian on this. We had a discussion at the last board meeting There's lots of stuff in your packet. There's, I think most importantly, the agenda memorandum from Brian Mooney. And I'm really gonna suggest that we work off page 2, which is page 127 of the packet of his memorandum under recommendation, and use that as kind of a template for us to, just one by one. There is I got way too much paperwork on this. There's a memo from Mark Lederer. There's a memo from me. Of course, there's the FGMA report. I had a memo in there about phased reconstruction alternative. Mark's had a facility studies next step dated February 18th. Dietmar provided today a 6-pager, which essentially took 6 pages from the FGMA report and provided additional notes, commentary, specifics, which I felt, I didn't spend a ton of time on it, but it was really helpful for me in terms of looking at different possibilities. In addition, I know that Brian was in contact with the architecture firm that worked on the Cross Plains new Village Hall that's under construction as we speak. I had a contact with Otter Lawson. They were involved with the facility study for this building back in 2014. We had not toured or talked or connected yet. That's a possibility coming up. We've had a lot of discussion and great input from resident Tom Deegan. And I know I sat in Tom's office this afternoon and looked at some of the stuff that he's pulled together, which I think has been really helpful. Tom also sent a preliminary agreement, which didn't make it into the packet, but it's also something that we could talk about today. But I'd like, and I know others of you have had conversations with Tom about some services that he would be able to provide. So I'd like to, again, use this memorandum to kind of track the discussion. I think Brian set this up so that, we could have discussion on each item and reach some decisions or some common understanding, and be able to communicate what the next steps might be. Does that sound like a good plan? And I think we can kind of incorporate the things that have been shared in various memos and information maybe we've even learned in our discussions with Tom Deegan. So I'll just read it. As a means of establishing a pathway forward with the facilities project, Brian has included a series of potential considerations the board may wish to approve or eliminate as viable options this evening. First is hire an outside firm to complete a secondary space needs assessment of the FGMA site plans at the Public Works Building. Estimated cost, associated costs $5,000 to $10,000 to include a conceptual design, or alternatively allow village staff to reassess space needs in preparation for an architecture request for proposal. So anyone wants to go first? I mean, my initial reaction to this was, boy, I think the village staff has communicated the need in terms of the overall square footage, what they need, what the administration needs, what the police department needs, what Public Works needs. I think Brian has a really good handle on that. He's gone to those departments and said, does this sound like this is going to fit? However, what we haven't done is put that space projection or expectation into a layout. What's it going to look like, how it's going to function. So I personally see the value of that. I mean, that's something that Tom has talked about a lot with the recent discussions. What are what are other members' thoughts on this first item? Bob?
Well, I think that, you know, I've sat in this room and listened to a lot of the public say that, you know, sometimes we hire too many consultants. We don't take enough advantage of the expertise we have in the village. And tonight we have Dietmar, who is in the construction industry, very knowledgeable. We have Tom Deegan with a tremendous amount of experience, willing to offer his services to help the village. And so I would agree that we need to address this space needs, and that it's not just a bulk square footage, that we need to take those needs and refine it into actual space that's functional for the different departments. My suggestion would be, rather than going out with an RFP to the broader community, that we utilize our village expertise as at least a first iteration on things. And I'm sure down the road that you know, if we come up with some preliminary designs, someone's gonna have to come up with some drawings, and someone's gonna have to come up with more refined details. And so, I guess what I'm saying is as a first step to, rather than jumping to some other outside firm, let's look at this expertise that we have and evaluate that before we make that firm decision.
Thank you, Bob.
That's my first comment.
Other comments on that, Dietmar?
Yeah, John, I'm gonna hijack this a little bit. So that's all right with you. Bob, you're too kind.
Is there another comment? No, I'm good. That's good.
There will be.
I'm no expert, but I appreciate the sentiment. I think I mentioned and shared my thoughts with you all at our last meeting about the facilities assessment study that was put forth in FGMA. And while I think that the information therein is succinct and it's interesting, it also confirms that a sort of one building solution isn't really within our fiscal means and ability. I'm going to temper this by saying that I do believe that our facilities, and mainly speaking, when I refer to the facilities, I think of Village Hall located at 810 Shore Boulevard, then the DPW building, and then the cold storage as sort of the consideration where investment into our future needs to happen and wants to happen. Now, how that looks like, I think all of us as board members and certainly constituents have different views, different opinions how that can come together. I try to look at the issue, and this is what I shared in my thoughts with you all here in my little doodles of things, to try to frame this in such a light of what could we afford, what I believe to be reasonably what we can reasonably afford, and how could that look like in a framework of a general scope of work, right? It's the whole conversation of chicken and egg. You know, we won't know more of what we need to design to or build to until we get through another, perhaps refined version of the space assessment. But you can also look at it in the inverse and say, we have these facilities, there's a certain square footage that comes with these facilities. And what can we do in sort of the normal parlance of improvement, and what seems reasonable to project with dollars per square foot, both hard and soft costs, and where do we land in all this? So to be a little bit more tactile in this conversation is, as I look at Village Hall, 810 Shore Boulevard, the one that we're in, we've got roughly 4,600 square feet in the basement. There are about 4,800 square feet on the first floor, and there's another, say, just for round numbers, 1,200 square feet of the garage space. So that tells me we have the space, we can operate administratively out of the space. Is it ideal? No. Does it need a facelift? Yes. To what extent does that facelift need to happen? Not sure yet. Is it a major remodel, a minor remodel? Don't know. And I can't answer all of these questions, but I can start looking at it in terms of dollars and assigning dollars to those square feet. So what I'd done, just the back of the napkin, and again, I'm not an expert, I shared this information with you all, is if I start running just some, what I believe to be reasonable numbers, they could be on the high end, they could be on the low end, they could be right in the middle. But when I start running these numbers and think about, without putting a specific focus of, will the police department fit in here, or is there a different spot for the police department to go in here? Or will administration live in here, or won't it live in here? But if I look at a general remodel, facelift to some extent of Village Hall, I can start running numbers. Arbitrarily assign numbers of design, planning, other soft costs, $225,000 for architecture fees. Picked a number, move and phasing costs, $55,000. And then you get into sort of the hard costs of construction. So you run 9,500 square feet at $160 a square foot, you get $1.52 million. Other repairs and TLCs for the first floor garage, 1,200 square feet at $50, $60,000. And then you start adding up numbers. So I'm rattling these numbers off relatively quickly, not for your purposes to follow, but to get to a conclusion of, with a renovation, is it reasonable to expect that Village Hall renovations between design and construction, so hard costs and soft costs, we can land somewhere between 1.8 to $2 million? Yeah, sounds about reasonable, sounds about right. And Shabnam, let me get through this and then you can ask away your questions. I applied that same methodology to the DPW building. We've got existing space. There's existing space that's currently not used or underutilized. Perhaps there's a way to decant programs out of Village Hall to make better space, create different space at Village Hall. Perhaps it's an opportunity for the police department to go over there. Does it come with other challenges, such as where do the police cars park? How do they stage in and out of there? How do you merge those operations? But I'm going to leave that all on the sidelines right now and simply say, apply those same metrics of hard costs, soft costs, what's reasonable? And I come up with this, feels like $2 million to $2.25 million of just hard and soft costs. And then there's been this conversation about the cold storage building. Well, cold storage building is an unheated space. It doesn't have a bathroom, it doesn't have any touchdown space beyond just storing materials there. Same methodology, sort of land at 200,000, 250,000. So when I add all of that up, I come to 4 million to roughly 4.5 million of just a general scope. And I'm only sharing these numbers that they're not gospel, and I want to be very clear about that with everyone listening to me today. But it puts it into light, what could we do? What does this look like? And does this give us an opportunity to perhaps manage other capital needs in the long term? So not building a facility that houses everything and sort of max out our CIP borrowing capacity, but perhaps something less, something more prudent, and then be able to use that debt capacity for other capital projects. So I believe that the directional conversation as to what we want to do, where do we want to go? Do we want to go to Green Bay or do we want to go to Milwaukee? Needs to sit with the board. And before we go into sort of any other studies or any other consultation, we need to understand, where do we want to go? Do we want to focus on, and there really aren't too many options if you think about it. Do we want to focus on remodeling space, or do we want to focus on creating new and different space? And that's relatively binary. So if we can focus the conversation on that, are there variations of that? Absolutely. But I think that needs to be the main focus of the board, to set direction, to set clear direction. And then we can peel off, how do we want to get there? What do we want to take along on this trip? So those are my thoughts. I'm no expert, but I can doodle my thoughts, and I've shared those thoughts with you, and I'm open to questions.
Okay, Dietmar, thank you. Shava?
So thank you very much, Dietmar. I appreciate your comments. And I think Dietmar raises the most important question. So what, how do I get to this? I think Bob, John, and I have been pushing and exploring the idea of fitting all the departments at the DPW building because of the value of this land and getting it on the tax base. That is the question I think we should answer first. Do we want to monetize this land at Village Hall? That is the driver. Because if the answer to that question is no, then I want to have all the conversations that Dietmar had. Which building is going to get renovated? What is the minimum we could do? That's exactly the conversation we should be having. But if the answer is yes, then we would not be having that conversation. We'd be having a different conversation. But to figure out which conversation to have, you got to answer that question. Do you want to monetize Village Hall? Do you want to put this land on the tax base?
Well, I have some thoughts on that, but Bob,
I guess my approach is that we want to look at a spectrum of options. I think that Shabnam has articulated one possible outcome, or one possibility that we try to put all of our services over at the firehouse, and then we try to monetize this land. I think it's logic would tell you if we're trying to put everything over at the firehouse, it's probably going to be the more expensive option, but that could be offset to a certain extent by the money we get out of this land. So I see that as one end of the spectrum. I think Dietmar has offered us some perspective on what might be towards the other end of the spectrum. In my discussions with Tom, he has articulated some ideas that, in my mind, would perhaps fall somewhere in the middle. And to me, I think the most practical and logical approach is, in as much as we can look at some of those different options, we can see what they look like from a layout standpoint. Is it one story, 2-story? Does it meet these space needs that the departments have? And how much is it going to cost? And to me, then we are able to choose within that spectrum of things and those choices that we have. It's like what you would do with a contractor if you were remodeling your house. You look at different options and, what is your budget? What can you afford? Everybody would like to have the Taj Mahal, but maybe we can only afford something more modest. And so in my mind, I want to look at the options. And as I've said before, I think we have some talent in the room and from our residents that are able to offer us some options to look at. It doesn't bind us to it, but it gives us the information to make an intelligent choice, a fiscally sound and practical choice that we can really build. And so as an engineer, that's sort of my approach and what I would advocate for.
the only thing I was going to add is kind of an agreement with both sides. I pivoted after the last board meeting, because we were talking about underground parking and there was just nothing but dollar signs associated with that. So when I went and looked at the square footages on the firehouse, it seemed to me, based on what we were hearing from the departments, that Public Works could fit there. Police works on the first floor and the basement. That'd be plenty of space. Would have to be remodeled, have to be redone. You have to spend some real money there. And I think Dietmar's numbers give us a little bit more handle on what that would be. And then the issue is how do you know, where do you accommodate administration, which is only about 2,500 square feet? And do you want to have some additional multi-use space or community space overlooking that green? I suggested that should go up on top. I think that's yet to be determined. I'm still interested. I think it's in the village's best interest to fully flesh that out, the feasibility of that. Because it does open up some economic and fiscal benefits for the village that are going to help us bridge this next 5 years. Developers are paying as much as $62 a square foot or more. We would do an appraisal for land along the University Avenue corridor. This body passed a University Avenue corridor plan that called for redevelopment on parcels along here. Redevelopment of this parcel would be $6 or $7 or $8 million improvement value, which is, you know, when you're a landlocked community, you need to take advantage of opportunities to add redevelopment. That's why I've suggested that that might be a better path. I think we have to do more work, and I think Brian's memorandum kind of outlines that, to understand that feasibility and be able to communicate to the residents. You know, we think this is feasible. The other constraint for me is, is the CIP that we've already approved. You know, can we do some combination of remodeling spaces, updating the standards, and if we need to add some additional spaces, but still keep it within the CIP numbers that we've previously established. So those are kind of the benchmarks for me, but I'm off of underground parking. I'm off of, you know, some of the things that were just driving the risk for real expense. And I think the last discussion we had as a board helped me personally focus in on this other direction. And to your point, Bob, there's been folks in the committee and in the community that have really kind of taken this on and added some value and gave us some other things to think about. So I'll just stop there. Shabna?
I think that there's no, even with more information, even with more photos, even with more research, I don't think that there's a black and white wrong or right decision to make. I think it's a preference. And this may not be the best analogy, but it just makes me think, do you want to be a renter or an owner? That it just sounds, I don't know if that's the best way to think of it or not, but do you want to do minimal work as a renter? You pay your rent, that's the end of it. You limit your costs, or as an owner, you got to put in 20% down payment and you're responsible for more. The monetizing this land is a little bit of a gamble that would generate revenues to come. And I think you got to decide which one you want to do. I don't think more information is going to answer that question. I think we have to just answer that question.
Well, I guess I would say that I want to get to a place where we're making an informed decision. So we're collecting this information to help us decide, is this affordable? Is it what we want? It's a menu that I see that we would like to put together that has numbers in it, has costs in it, so we can make an informed choice. Oh, this looks really nice, but we just can't get there financially. Or maybe we can take some aspects we'd really like to have, but we do more of a minimal remodel. I think we're all making assumptions. We're all making guesses until we get some hard numbers down, even if they're estimates, but they're at least a spot in the wall that you can work from. And that's where I'd like to be with this, because I think that if we make too many assumptions up front and too many constraints, we're not going to have an informed decision. We're going to have a biased decision. So I'd like to just keep all options open, generate what we can, and then make our decisions based on that data.
I'm going to go to Carol. Okay, Carol?
So Just looking at what we were tasked with, which is to address Brian's,
Yeah.
knockout list here. You know, do we need more assessment of space space needs? Do we need that? Do we need a secondary space needs assessment by an outside professional? So when I'm trying to wrap my head around that, I'm looking at Dietmar's back of the envelope, which is extremely helpful. It's very, very helpful to have numbers and to have a context around those numbers. And the context that I see for what Dietmar provided is making use of these structures that we already have. So we're renovating, not new construction. And so we get the value out of already having the foundation, the footings, the roof, you know, and it's something we can afford. According to the CIP, we can afford $4.5 million and soft costs wrapped in as well. Question is, can all of our staff work there? I mean, is this addressing, would this be addressing the square footage needs? Now, I don't know, since I haven't been immersed in this, how far off the square footage we have now is from the square footage that we think we need. Apparently FGMA thought we needed even more. We've decided that that's not realistic. So before I would answer Brian's first question, which is, do we need another consultant to do a secondary needs assessment, or can we do one ourselves? It would really help me to know how far off are we? And my second point is, just with respect to Shabnam's points about needing to know whether we're going to monetize this property, sell it, develop it. Nothing is telling me that so far that's a feasible situation, because that means that everybody is going to have to be put into one building. Our knowledge about that hypothetical one building is that it's too expensive for us. It would come a lot closer to new construction than it would to renovations. So in my mind, the onus is on anyone to show us that we can actually afford a scenario where we sell this building and focus completely on newish construction or phased construction at the DPW site. So I guess I need somebody to tell me how off are we on the square feet to figure out if we need more professional help with our plans.
Okay, we'll hold that question mark.
Yeah, so I just want to follow up on that. So my question would be, is there a consensus among the people, Bob, Brian, whoever else has looked at the space needs of the village, come up with a set of numbers, so we don't find ourselves here 2 weeks from now, a month from now, 2 months from now, with an argument as we're starting to do conceptual design about whether the space needs we have fit in those designs. So I don't know. I'm not doing these numbers. I do other numbers with dollar signs, but not a lot of these square footage numbers. So what I'm looking for is just, I'm not looking to make my own independent judgment. I'm looking at the judgment of the people that have looked at this issue. FGMA, I've already named the names. So is there a consensus, or is there need to do additional work to develop that consensus? Because I'm not going to move from where I am until there is such a consensus, because I don't want to go any further into the planning process without a consensus as to what those space needs are. To me, that's job one.
I'll try to answer it a couple ways. One is, I think there is consensus in Brian's part and the staff's part in terms of the overall square footage. What that looks like, what that conceptual design looks like, that's not fleshed out. That was not FGMA's.
I'm not talking about conceptual design. But I'm concerned about something more than say, well, the village needs 15,000 square feet, 10,000 square feet, whatever the numbers.
Right.
I'm looking for more than that. I'm not looking for the conceptual design, but I want to know that the specific functions of the departments can be safely and effectively carried out in that allocation
Mark,
of space.
what I'm hearing from Brian and I'm hearing from the staff is, yes, we can make that work. So that the police can fit on the first floor and in the basement, that Public Works and the additional garage space, that Public Works can function in the remaining Public Works space. And then we have to find additional space to accommodate the admin and some additional community spaces. Another way to look at it is Potter Lawson in 2014 measured the square foot of this building and it was 13,000 square feet. We measured the square feet of the firehouse. It was 14,208. So that's 27,000 square feet. If we were able to provide, I think we can efficiently locate the space needs of all of our departments at the firehouse for around 19,000 square feet. And have the financial benefits of putting this property, leveraging this property to benefit the village, not only in the near term, in terms of the capital improvement. Did you guys follow me on that?
Yeah, I'm not,
It's-
it's not adding up in my brain.
If you take 13 and 14, we currently have 27,000 square feet between these two buildings.
Yeah.
Pretty inefficiently laid out. By using that existing firehouse footprint and adding another 2,500 to 3,000 for administration and another 2,000 for a multi-use community space, that's around 19,000. Okay. There's also some talk about adding 2,000 to 3,000 next to the cold storage for vehicle maintenance and wash bay. We don't think you could do everything we've talked about today and a vehicle maintenance and wash bay at the firehouse site. So the decision and the acceptance was for Terry and the group, yeah, we could have vehicle maintenance there and we could have wash bays there because that's a scheduled event. That's a scheduled deal. But we want to have the shop activities, the day-to-day stuff actually happen in the interior of the village. So a lot of this has been done kind of informally, is done in meetings, has gone through, they've asked this question, and there's a consensus that it will fit. Okay. Now, and that was always for me, that was always the good news. That was always the aha, because that opens up some other possibilities for the village, which I think are going to matter a lot for our financial future. Now the hard work is, or the work that you need to have is you need a professional to kind of weigh in and go, you know, what's the layout going to look like? How's it going to function? What's it going to look like? So that we can at least come into this setting and communicate to the residents. This is what we're thinking. This is what it's going to look like, more or less, without spending real money. Here are the costs. Based on this first get-go, we think we're going to have a good handle because we're going to have contractors that are going to actually review it and give some cost projections. Here's how long it's going to take to do this. And, here's the overall benefits, to the village. What do you think? We're not at that point right now. I think we're trying to get to that point. I think Brian's memo kind of lays out some of the steps that we're talking about in order to get there. I'd like us to, consider each of those and discuss each of those in short order. So that we can move this forward. I don't think we have enough to make a decision on what this ultimately is going to look like and where everything's going to go. But I'm encouraged about the possibility and the feasibility that we could do this, that we could have a lot less square footage. We could be much more efficient. We could provide a much better workspace for our staff. So they're not working on the floor when they're maintaining trucks and what have you. Rob.
Yeah, so if I can summarize my understanding of the situation, I think I'm convinced that we have a good handle on the space needs. I'm not sure we need to invest a lot more into understanding that problem. If I'm thinking about it as plans and options, plan A, the one that we've been kind of throwing out there for the last year or so is sell this building, put it on the tax base, move everything into the firehouse in a new building. And with the FGMA,
You know, in a renovated building, which may have some new things, but go ahead.
Yeah.
Yeah.
and the FGMA study that we got out suggested, yes, it is possible, but it would cost $20 million. So
For
I
a
think
new,
we're,
for a new building, but go ahead.
so, I think we're all in agreement that that's not gonna work. Now,
Yeah.
Plan B is we just sort of fix up the facilities that we have, and Dietmar has given us some very helpful information about what that would look like and how much that would cost. So that's another possibility. And Brian Mooney is giving us, kind of a plan C, which is, well, let me just say, a plan C is maybe we can still make, still sell this facility. We can move most of our, our operations into the firehouse site
Site.
using renovation, building on the second floor, et cetera. No underground parking. Okay, so that's a plan C option. So what Brian Mooney is giving us is we desperately need new facilities for public works. His opinion is that's the most pressing need with code violations and how insufficient that the use of that space currently is. So let's engage with an RFP or an architect who can give us multiple options. And then, once we get those multiple options, we can see how much they cost. Then we can decide whether we're gonna go with Plan B, fix up our facilities as they currently are in the current sites that they are, or still try to sell this site and move everything into the firehouse site. So to me, I feel like that does make a lot of sense, because it's kind of like we're still getting the information as we go that we need to make the decision. We're being very wise with our resources as we do that, and we're not making the decision until we have all the information, until we know all the variables. So I think that what Brian has outlined here, it makes a lot of sense.
That's helpful, Rob. Up?
Getting back to Mark's question about the square footage, I think we need a little more refinement. So, I think the question that was asked to Terry was, you've got all this space, does that work for you? Yeah, it works for me. I like the 8,000 square feet I have. But that's really not telling you his real needs, and as we look at these building designs on the site, it's not just the gross square footage that you have to consider. You have to consider how that square footage is configured. And so I think we need to do some refinement. We can start there and say, yeah, 8,000 square feet is wonderful, but what if we can only get 6,000 square feet for public works, because we also want to put the police over there? Well, then you have to now look at how that space is going to be laid out and maybe trade off some things. And so I caution us from just making the assumption that 8,000 is going to work and that's the way we're going to go. I think we have to dig a little deeper and flesh out a little bit some plans so that we can see if that square footage is going to work geometrically on the site. And that's part of the sort of preliminary design process. So you can meet the functional needs that you have to operate, but also that you can fit it on the space that you're trying to put it, if that makes sense. And I would further say, Rob, that I think we have another option that, as I said before, I think we have Tom Deegan in the room, who has a lot of experience that has already come up with some designs that I think are option D or E or wherever you were. So, again, I would like to exhaust I would like to look at that before I would commit to run out with another $40,000 to hire a architectural consultant when we may have some of that information within our village community.
That's a good segue. So, this afternoon I got a preliminary agreement, the latest rendition from Tom, and I'll just share with you. Some of you have seen this, other folks haven't, but essentially he lays out on one page of paper, phase one, preliminary space program validation. Under this agreement, Deegan shall validate and modify the space programs, kind of to this point that you're talking about, of the village departments presented in the FGMA report. After receiving input from the village will provide access to interview the department heads. He's going to work through Brian Mooney, who will serve as the primary contact. And then Tom would deliver the following deliverable to the village for phase one: a preliminary space program for each of the 3 village departments. We'll present and verbally summarize the deliverable to the village facilities committee, which, I mean, I would argue could also be the board, the complete board, because of the expertise that we have. And we do special meetings for stuff like this, for really important issues. I would make that argument. Time period for Deegan to provide this deliverable is estimated to be 30 days. So 30 days, we'd have a much better handle on some of the questions that have been raised today in terms of the space. The big stuff works, but we'd have a much better handle in terms of conceptually how it would work and what it would look like in terms of layouts. And then phase two, preliminary site design study. Deegan would perform a preliminary site design study of the former fire station site for possible relocation of the village hall, police department, and public works, including forestry, into a renovated or new construction building with 1-story and 2-story alternatives. Deegan shall provide the following deliverables under phase two: preliminary site plans for 1- and 2-story renovated or new construction building alternatives on the site, the former fire station. B, preliminary construction cost estimates for the 1- or 2-story building alternatives, and C, a preliminary construction schedule for 1- and 2-story building alternatives. Deegan shall prevent and verbally summarize the deliverables. Again, it could be for the board. And the time period for that would be an estimated 30 days. So within 2 months, we would have a lot in terms of informing our ability to make decisions on moving forward. Obviously, we'd make everything that we have available to him in terms of documents, et cetera. Item 4, no fee for Deegan work, reimbursement of expenses. Deegan shall not charge a fee for performing this work and providing the deliverables called for in this agreement. The village shall, however, reimburse Deegan for any out-of-pocket fees and expenses incurred by Deegan for architectural, engineering, printing costs, and similar services related to performing this work and providing the deliverables under this agreement, up to a maximum of $5,000 for both phase 1 and 2 combined. So that's the agreement. That he's provided. My first read of that is that's a lot of information for a relatively small amount of money compared to what we just spent. I'm not in a position, and Brian's not in a position to sign an agreement with Deegan without the governing body giving me authorization or giving Brian authorization. Carol.
So, I don't know when this was, written out. It would be nice for us to be able to read it. I don't know if you're hoping that we will move on this tonight.
I know, I wanted you to be aware of it. I mean, I just got it this afternoon.
Yeah.
Julie and I
So-
talked about it and was like, no, we're not gonna throw it in the packet at the last second.
So-
But Tom is here, he's had discussions with me, he's had discussions with Brian and with some of the other trustees, and I just felt it was important that we disclose that and discuss it.
So I know this is not this is not the result of a regular RFP. I know that RFPs don't have to be issued until you get up to $25,000.
Right.
For construction, on the other hand, I know there are public noticing requirements for anything. I don't know if it's above or at or above $5,000. So I'm just hoping that we will dot all the i's and cross all the t's if we do decide to go this way. It sounds like a lot of great information, but I just want to make sure that we're following proper process.
That's a good point.
Perhaps we can convince Tom to charge $4,900.
Wait, no.
So
I think it said, at a maximum of 5,000. That's what I saw. There's plenty of room underneath there. Mark?
My concern still is, I'm still on square one and everybody's racing to square 5 and square 10 and so on. I'm still hung up on space allocation needs. Are we in a position right now to say, well, let's just turn a architect designer firm loose? We're just going to talk to them and say, here's what we think the space is, 10,000 here, 5,000 here. And that's sufficient to begin the conceptual design process we have confidence in. What I'm looking for is a piece of paper or multiple pieces of paper that say, here's the space allocation. Here's the allocation that Brian stands behind and any of the trustees who have looked at this issue stands behind. And that's the basis of the plan. That's where we kick off the process. But I'm quite leery based on the FGMA experience, not letting this thing get away from us and making sure that as we enter into the process that we have consensus, that we are together as a board about what the space needs are and not just the gross square footage, but how they're needed. I mean, I'm just trying to be fair to the conceptual designer, let's make sure we give them what they normally expect from a client going into this process. So there's no misunderstandings down the road.
Yeah, Mark, I think that's very fair. I think we've done a good job kind of clawing back what we were at, 50,000 square feet with FGMA when they first got started. So we've got to the point where at least we've had those internal discussions to say, this is what we're going to need, but no one knows exactly what it's going to look like. Here's an opportunity for us to have a better handle on what it's going to look like, how it's going to function, get some sign off, have Tom's engineer or designer sitting with Terry to go, okay, it looks like we've got about 6,000 square feet available for public works. You said these are the things that you need. Here's a first look at, this is how it's going to work. And that's included is included in the quote.
I understand that, but what I'm saying is
can
the deliverable here, the deliverable is the space allocation needs and any other documents that the conceptual designer would normally expect in a kickoff of a process like this, for which the village, the board stands behind. And I haven't seen that document. I've heard tons of talk, tons of square footage numbers, but I don't want us to go into a conversation with the conceptual designer and you or Dietmar, Bob, whoever we'll talk you through it. That doesn't work for me.
Can I say something real quick?
We're going to do Shabnam and then we're going to give Tom an opportunity to comment.
So Mark is asking an important question. It's valid. Are the space needs correct or not? Are they accurate? Those numbers have moved around a lot over the course of the last year with FGMA. And I think it is worthwhile to answer Mark's question that we do invite Tom Deegan into the conversations, whether he's a member of the services committee or through this arrangement, which the arrangement is only asking for out-of-pocket expenses to be covered. He's working as a volunteer. So because the reality is Bob, myself, and John, as much as we know, we'll never know as much as Tom does. Tom does this for a living. Tom has like 20, 30, 40 years experience with a team of people. It's just, if you want the assurance that the biggest project in the village is going to be handled properly, the most expensive project, have the expert give you a rubber stamp. And I think that would be the proper way to go to get all the answers questioned.
That's a good segue for Tom, but we're gonna go to Carol first.
Yeah, with all due respect to Tom, I think Mark's point still is valid in that as a we're talking about municipal needs, right? Terry knows what he needs, Patrick knows what he needs, the admin staff, they know, the police, they know. As a municipality, we gotta decide what we need, right? And then in my mind, and then it goes to a designer, an architect. I mean, so we gotta figure out, we gotta be solid on what we need.
Can I answer Carol's question?
I don't think so, Bob. I'm gonna call an order on this one. We don't invite generally members of the public to participate in these conversations. I think I would like to really make sure that we don't take exceptions to what we commonly enforce when we ask others not to join the conversation.
I disagree, but I would like to address what Carol said. I think that this is a bit of an iterative process. And Shabnam said that, are these numbers accurate or not? They're estimates, they're guesses in some ways. So that's why, we need to have an effort to try to refine them. And I think that that's a bit of an iterative process back and forth with the designer. That the designer talks to Terry and says, okay, you want 8,000 square feet, but if we're gonna, again, I'm repeating myself, but if we're gonna fit this in this space, can we move, can this space look like this? And that's where Terry has to give some feedback and say, well, yes, that'll work for me, or no, it won't. And so we want to give Terry the space that he wants. We also want to give him the configuration that he wants, not just square footage. And I don't know if I'm making my point clear, but it's more than just square footage. It's how that square footage is laid out. And that is an iterative process between the designer and the client to make sure that they get that. And hopefully you don't have to iterate too many times. If you have good professionals, you can get there pretty quick because they know sort of what the standard needs are for different departments, for the police department, how much a police department typically uses for evidence storage or for this or that. And FGMA, that was part of what they tried to put together, but they had very inflated numbers projecting out 50 years that weren't realistic for our village.
That's right. So, I mean, Tom, I already indicated I'd give Tom an opportunity. So I know we have a disagreement on the board, but I'm going to provide that opportunity. Tom, you raised your hand.
Yeah, just a little clarification. Mark, I took my set of services and I deliberately broke it into phase 1 and 2, addressing your concern, which I think is extremely valid, that the first step is to look at the space program that FGMA put together and verify it, talking to the department head, so we have a better list of rooms with appropriate sizes. So we have a total number of square feet that the department head agrees to, Brian does, is brought to the board for them to agree on that. That's that number. It's just all the list of rooms with a space allocation for each room that totals a number. So there isn't any design happening in the first phase of my work. It's just verification of the space program. That's all. It's a tiny little step. But it's a step in a very logical process that begins with a space program that everyone agrees on, that then goes to a preliminary, that goes to where is that block of space going to reside in space? And you look at preliminary studies of the renovated fire department building. You look at how a new construction could happen there and accommodate that block of space. And then even after that, that's when you start to look at how that space is designed. But when you're working with professionals, when you allocate that block of space, they can say, yes, I can design the space to work within that block of space. You don't have to do the design first, because then you might get all bogged down in the detail. The first order of business is to agree to the numbers and then look at how that block of space can fit into a building concept, and then develop a space program, and then refine the space, a floor plan, and refine the floor plan so that you can really get a solid price number. But you can do a price estimate early on, but the price refinement happens after the floor plan. So I think that John misspoke a little bit. This first step of my work would be just verifying the space program, the list of rooms and the numbers, so that everyone knows that agrees to what the total square footage is for each of the 3 departments. And that's exactly what Mark was suggesting, which I thought was a very wise thing, to really narrow it down to that as the first step.
Thanks, Tom. I'll try to not misspeak. But I do it often. So we'll keep it on the dais now. So other comments, questions before we move forward with the memorandum? I just will say about this preliminary agreement, Brian has not seen this yet, or maybe Brian has seen it now, but he's indisposed. He's in faraway places. So I haven't had an opportunity to discuss this with him. Certainly, I'll be really interested to hear what he thinks, and then we'd be in a position to react or respond to the board at some point to say, we'd like the board to consider this or not consider it. So, other thoughts? Mark?
I just say, we really need to get ourselves better organized about how we're doing this. There are different voices on this board.
Yeah.
With different opinions.
Yeah.
And I don't think that's a position we can be in and then hire someone. And then who's that individual accountable to? Who's he reporting to? Who is he taking instruction from? It doesn't make any sense to me. This board at some point will have to put a motion on the table. And when that motion comes, and I just, I no pride of authorship, but I put that little 1 page in to say, we have to identify who's on the behalf of the village, who's leading this process, and exactly what the steps in the process are to empower that individual or that group to proceed to nail down, either on their own with a consultant, what those space allocation needs are, bring that back to the board's review, and then at that point, the board would move to the next stage, which is conceptual design. Okay, but we've been talking for a long time tonight. Last time we met on this subject, we were here till 11:30 at night. The motion was on the table. I'm not blaming anybody. I'm just saying there's a lot of drift. It's a lot of discussion without really moving the process forward. So I really urge the board to think about who's leading the process, what the deliverable is. Okay, it's coming back to the board. That's step 1, and then moving into step 2. And until that motion is put together, we will continue to talk about this, but nothing will be accomplished, in my opinion.
So, Mark, are you saying then that we need to take a step back, engage Brian, make him aware of this proposal, get feedback from the architect he contacted for Cross Plains, get feedback from the Potter Lawson group?
No, I'm thinking that we definitely need Brian in this conversation. I hope, as the chief administrative officer of this village, to which all the department heads are accountable to, it's Brian that I hold accountable to.
Right.
For the space and the functioning of those departments. So yeah, I want Brian.
Right. No, but my point is that, Brian has reached out and engaged the departments on this, has gotten good feedback, has a good understanding of what the needs are. Put this memorandum together as a process for us to give him more direction. My question for the board is, do we need to consider the preliminary agreement and get that information before we can tackle items 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 on the memorandum this evening?
What I'm looking for is a motion and a plan, a motion to adopt a plan about how to proceed. And I prefer it to be authored by Brian because he's the person I'm going to hold accountable for. Now, who he consults in terms of putting that plan together, I don't care. I mean, that's up to Brian. But that's what I think we need, because without that motion, people will be going off doing things without the support of the board.
So we're gonna go to Shabnam and then Dietmar and then see what we do next. Shabnam?
Let Dietmar go first.
Dietmar?
I struggle with the re-edification of the space assessment needs, only in the simple terms. We've gone already through, it's already been gone through by the staff. What are we hoping to find differently in terms of response? Simple fact remains, in my eyes, there's 3,000 square feet in the administrative space in the basement of the DPW building, and the same 3,000 square feet on the first floor. The first floor is, for all intents and purposes, vacant. The basement, for all intents and purposes, perhaps 50% utilized. I mean, that's 4,500 square feet that's not being utilized. And if I run the numbers, again, discounting any of the vehicle maintenance bays or anything like that, just administrative space, I come up with 22,000 square feet of administrative space that we're currently occupying between here, basement, first floor, and DPW building administrative space, basement and first floor, of which 4,500 square feet presumably is vacant and not being used. This is where I go back to, I don't want to spend money on recreating new facilities, different facilities. I want to have a low-cost renovated option that better utilizes the underutilized space that currently exists. And I want to use the borrowing capacity for other projects within the village. That's where I want to land on this. And that is the direction, to your point, we need the direction by the board before we go on chasing anything else, any other consultant, any other information. This board has to set the direction. Where are we going? So this is my direction. I want to go there.
Well, I'm really glad Dietmar spoke first because you completely changed what I wanted to say. I think that the issue of the space needs, if we were to work with Tom Deegan, my understanding is that it is not a lot of work, very, very little, could be done in a few hours and at maybe little to no cost. But what Dietmar is saying is the right questions to be asking. Are we going down this route or not? I think that the work on the space needs with Tom Deegan would be, for phase 1, would be quick, maybe in a couple days even. But that the phase 2, which is the most important part of what are the costs, I want to see that, because we've not been able to get that information from Cross Plains, from FLAD, from Potter, Lawson. So that is something I would recommend to the board that we move in that direction to finalize the space needs, which should be done relatively quickly. And then there's an assurance, because I'm not an architect, nobody here is an architect. You have somebody with assurance that the numbers are accurate, and then we get the costs. And then once you have the costs, I want to have the conversation that Dietmar's having. Are you renovating? But let me say this, are you renovating or are you not? And before we have that, I would ask every board member, what's the number? If it comes back, is it 10 million? Is it 5 million? Is it 15 million? What is your number for deciding? Because obviously renovating is cheaper, obviously, just doing, little bit of touches on this building and otherwise is the cost-effective approach. But at what number would you be willing to I want to borrow the 8 million because I know that the tax revenue is going to make a difference. Who can answer that question? Can we have finance answer that question at the same time?
Carol, now I'm gonna comment. Go
Yeah, we
ahead.
already know from the CIP that we've scheduled for $6 million borrowing for the construction and
Right.
almost $1 million for the architectural designs. So that's what we have to work with.
I'm gonna I'll make this comment. Right now, I still want to pursue this other opportunity before we sink $2 million into this building and take away the opportunity for it to be redeveloped for a taxable $6, $7, $8 million project that provides diverse housing opportunities and additional residents for the village. That's where I'm at. Now, if it becomes impossible or infeasible for us to do everything at the firehouse, then that may be the option we have to fall back on. But I'm not prepared to say, yeah, I'm ready to put $2 million into this place and say goodbye to that opportunity for another 20 years or 30 years. And we would still have vacant space at Public Works, even if we renovated it. Go ahead.
So I'm sorry to be so basic, but is the main question then whether we can actually, refining our knowledge of whether we can actually fit all of our functions into the DPW building? That
FGMA
space
said,
needs and all of that,
Yeah.
that's where we are.
yeah, that's right. FGMA said it's feasible. We took them a while to get to that point. And then I pivoted and was like, well, we don't need underground parking. We could figure it out. Based on the stuff I saw from Tom today, there's some interesting possibilities. I wanna run that out. I wanna make sure we have that good understanding, because the biggest the biggest economic bang for the village in the near term would be able to leverage this and have everything in the central part of the village. We should, because there's no other way I can add $6, $7, $8 million in improvement value and add, $2.5 million or more to our bottom line, which we can leverage to help us with McKenna Park, which we can use to leverage for other things, which we can use to help bridge the next 5 years. We heard today, boy, we're $200,000 behind Maple Bluff in terms of, we'd have to spend $200,000 just to equal Maple Bluff is on officer salaries. So I'm trying to bridge this year's budget with 2030 when the TIFs mature. TIF 3 and I think TIF 4, and which will put another $600,000 in our coffers. So that's my rationale. But if we put 2 million into this and 2 million into that, it's an opportunity cost. It's a lost taxable opportunity, and we already got hit with the UW purchase of the credit union, which is going to cost us, Julie,
50,000.
45, 40, no, 45, 50,000, I seem to remember. At
Per
current
year.
rates,
Well, cost is relative, but yeah, it will
Right.
be less from them. It doesn't lower our levy of it, if
Right.
I'm understanding it correctly.
right.
But it's going to be carried by the taxpayers.
So so I won't say anything more than that. That's, I understand what Dietmar is saying. I just have a different opinion right now. I want us to pursue, I don't have enough information to say that confirms this is the direction we should go. But I'd like to get more information. And, there's a proposal that's been put onto us, that we haven't discussed. We haven't discussed it fully as a board, and the public hasn't seen it fully. Carol.
Yeah, so just to ask another brain dead question.
Yeah.
Dietmar has showed us a way that the DPW building can be renovated for $2 million-ish. And others of us are saying that we think we can fit all the functions in there. But what I'm also hearing is not for $2 million, right? So,
My threshold is
this what we're trying to figure out by either issuing, not an RFP, but getting work design work or assessment work from either Potter Lawson or the Cross Plains people or Mr. Deegan. This is the piece that we're trying to fill in. Is that correct? Exactly how could we fit everyone into the DPW building?
at
And what will it cost?
I think that's what we'll have in relatively short order. Other thoughts? What I'm feeling is there's no interest on the board to go through these next 5, 7 items until we address this first issue. What I'm hearing is Brian's gonna have to be engaged on what happened with this discussion. And we're gonna evaluate what's in front of us, and we're gonna communicate to the board and make a recommendation on what that is, including motion language, to Mark's point, for the board to respond to and for us to vote on. Shadna.
Can I make a motion to authorize the administrator to spend up to $5,000 on expenses to assist us with getting the space needs finalized and the cost estimates and the designs? Can I make that motion? Will it pass? We don't want to keep having these conversations month after month after month. Give the man the tools he needs to get the job done so that the next time you meet, we're not having the same conversation. Like, let's get the answers, and it costs money to make money. It's not a lot. It's only if there are some expenses. And I'm not saying it's signed with any specific person, but just authorizing the administrator to cover costs of up to $5,000 to answer the questions for the board so that the next meeting, we have a more productive conversation. Is there a second?
I'll second that.
Okay, now I need the full wording.
Oh.
I have to authorize the administrator to spend up to $5,000
In expenses for finalizing the space needs analysis and providing proposals? Is it in the design phase? Is it proposals? What is the exact deliverable? Proposal.
I think it's probably fine to just authorize them to spend that money to get the space needs and to nail that thing down.
Okay.
In a condition that we can then approach it.
Hold on, Mark, hold on.
Sorry.
Mark, then Carol, then Rob. Julie, what do you need?
I think, okay, to authorize the administrator to spend up to $5,000 in expenses for finalizing the space needs analysis. Is that sufficient?
I think that's
Sure.
where I put the
And
period.
Bob, you're fine with that?
I'm fine with that.
I was gonna add-
Wait a second.
I was gonna add some caveats about, you know, and how he's gonna engage the board, but that's gonna happen anyway, so I don't think that has to be part of the
Just-
motion. Carol?
Yeah, I, kind of feel like if we're in a big hurry, I would rather have a special meeting than to try to wordsmith something that we're not sure about. Brian's not here. Brian
That's
has
fair.
a voice in this. If this is important and we need to move it forward, then let's have a special meeting instead of just, you know, 10:30
At
at night
10:46.
trying to figure out what. we're doing.
I understand that and I would consider that. Rob?
Yeah, so my question was specifically about the wording and what Brian will interpret this motion as if it passes. You know, this proposal I think is compelling. But given that Brian's on vacation, I would really want to hear what he has to say about it, if he needs to discuss with the village attorney about it.
And the public hasn't seen it yet, and
Yeah.
all of you have not
And-
seen it.
And so since Carol has also just made this offer, I also think that it would be great to do a special meeting. That might be the more preferred option.
Just on this topic.
But you realize that this motion as worded doesn't obligate
That's-
Brian to
Right.
do.
He's not signing any contract.
So yeah, my point was, I want to be clear that the motion does not compel Brian to act in any way. So in that sense, I think I could support it. But we may have a better option possibly with a special meeting if that's the other route we want to go.
Dietmar?
So if it doesn't compel Brian, why are we voting on it? I mean, if Brian thinks it's in the best interest not to enter into this, and we as a board look at him and say, well, we authorized you to, I mean, this makes zero sense. This is so half-cocked. I can't.
So-
I think it does
Imagine.
compel him to deliver the space allocation needs to the board. What it doesn't compel him to do is to hire anyone to do it. I think that's what it said.
I'm getting persuaded that it would be better for us to have a meeting just dedicated to this with Brian in the room, with the information fully distributed and transparent, with a full agenda on what we're going to decide.
Hold on. I think we need that, but I don't think this hinders that. We have met 100 times. We continue to meet. It's a lot of work. And all we're gonna meet again, and all we're asking is that we could use the printer if it's there. If you gotta do something special for $500, allow that to happen so the next meeting can be meaningful. That's all it is. Let us use equipment, all it is.
Like, it's not a bad motion. I don't know if it's necessary. I think we could get to the same place without having to do the motion
I
on
think,
the fly.
sure. I think what I didn't want is for us to be in a meeting and let's say Tom is with us and he's like, I really want to get this for you guys, but nobody's going to pay for it. So let's go to the next board meeting to get $500 so I could finish this conversation. I don't want that to happen. I don't want to be in the middle of a meeting and have the opportunity to answer all these questions, but we can't because we gotta wait for the next board meeting. That's all this is.
I'm okay if we have a specific meeting. I think we have an opportunity here to get some information that as Shabnam says, that the next meeting will have more information to look at and at what I see is a very reasonable price and that'll help inform us. And I would suggest that if we're going to have a meeting, let's have it sooner than later and get moving on it.
Doesn't have to be a long meeting either.
Doesn't have to
Rob?
be a
What's
long
the purpose of the meeting?
One benefit of having a special meeting is we could have it in the agenda where Mr. Egan could
Be available to answer questions.
and, right now he's a bit hamstrung.
As could other potential entities.
I think it would be helpful if we have that meeting, that it's preceded by the drafting of a motion by Brian.
Yeah.
So that the
I know, I made
motion's
that
on the
note.
table before
Right.
the discussion even starts,
Right.
and we're all working towards
Yeah.
voting up or down or modifying.
He's gonna see this.
I'm sorry.
Yeah, okay.
Here's where I'm thinking we're gonna leave, and tell me if I'm wrong. I hope to meet again with Tom, that we use his expertise. I've had an hour-long conversation with him multiple times on the subject. He's got a wealth of knowledge. And I'm assuming that Bob, myself, John, Brian, and Tom will have several meetings over the course of the next month so that we can come back to this group with better answers. That's where I think we're going.
My hope is we'll have a special meeting before the next board meeting, which is only 3.5 weeks away.
But what's the point of that meeting? Before we do all that, or we're not going to do anything until then?
No, I think we'll do quite a bit. Carol?
Yeah, I think the point of the special meeting is that we'll have a packet with the information in it that we're supposed to be considering. Brian will be here. Brian will get the full context instead of having it kind of plopped on his desk when he gets back from vacation, that he's supposed to do something that he hasn't even heard about yet.
Yeah.
So I think there's the rush, but let's just let's just step through this. Let's have a packet, let's have a special meeting, let's have Brian there. Tom's not going anywhere. He's around. So let's just do it right.
There's a motion on the table, Dietmar.
Yeah, I'd like to dispense with the motion.
Is there a second to that? Thank you, Mark. Further discussion?
Oh, I'm sorry, I want to vote on this.
Or you want, that's what you want to
Let's
do.
get the motion.
I
either
thought you were
considered or
gonna,
not.
I thought you were encouraging the applicants to withdraw.
No, not at all. I want
Well,
to limit debate. Let me put it this way. I want to limit debate so we can get to voting on the
Well,
motion that's on the table.
Okay, well, I thought we were gonna have a meeting first, so I would have expected maybe that you were retracting the motion because we're gonna have the meeting and then maybe vote on it, or?
I would like to call
What
a
do you
vote
suggest?
on the motion that has been put on the table and has been seconded by someone.
Has it
By
been
me.
seconded?
Yeah, it was seconded by Bob.
Seconded by you.
Julie has it.
Yeah, really have.
One question.
Go ahead.
We do have in the CIP for 2025, $100,000 set aside for planning for the facilities. Would this 5,000 not just be coming out of that planning
I think there's $800,000.
or 800, whatever?
800.
I'm sorry if I misspoke.
That's all right.
We had money set aside for planning for the facilities.
Right.
So do we need?
That's great. I retract the vote. I retract it. You're right. We don't need the motion.
I don't know. I'm just at, would that be tied into it or is that money set aside purely for architecture? It says planning.
Planning.
Yes.
I retract my second then if she's retracting the motion and, with the assumption that we're gonna have a meeting, talk about this in more detail and give Brian the information he needs. It sounds like he then has reign to go spend the money if he sees fit.
Cool.
Is that
What
fair?
do you think? Is that fair?
I just wanted to be done with this conversation. I wanted to vote on this.
No, I know, we need that,
Why don't you just
Dietmar.
tell me to shut up then?
No, we need that, Dietmar. Okay, this is a tough one.
Motion's retracted?
Yeah, thank you, Julie.
It wasn't in proper order because I think I called the vote, but
Right.
let's let it slide.
That's why I gave Dietmar the opportunity to say, yeah, it's fine with him. Otherwise, we would have done the
Can
vote.
I? Well, okay.
Go ahead.
So,
I want to end this.
go ahead.
All right, so, did you have one more thing relative
Well,
to this?
all I wanted to say is whenever do we now schedule this special meeting? You're gonna
No.
do it later? Okay.
No, I have to coordinate with Brian.
Okay.
And we will, this is a priority. So, and we will have a productive special meeting. It just, I don't think it was fair to the public for us to say, we're gonna authorize 5,000 for this. And we're gonna, there's not, we haven't been transparent with what we're considering. So it's not enough for me just to read something at the meeting and then for us to do something. It's gotta be in the packet. There has to be enough time for people to review it and weigh in. So I won't say anything more. Item 8, report of officials and committees. I didn't have anything other than we're trying to schedule a candidate forum. So candidates have been contacted via doodle poll. We're gonna pick a date. Greg Lampy will be moderating the session as he has it'll probably be a 1 hour, or I forget if it's an hour or an hour and a half. It's 2 hours. It's 2 hours. And I weighed in my dates. I'm sure other people have weighed in on their dates. So David Sykes will turn that around pretty quickly and that candidate forum will be scheduled. Brian's not here, but his information is in the packet, his letter to the board on stuff that he's working on. And of course, he had the recommendations on the agenda items. Police chief monthly report is in your packet. We've got committee reports in the packet. Anyone want to comment on any committee issues? Dietmar.
Well, let's
And then
let
Rob.
No, let's
I
go
have a
Rob.
question.
Okay.
Are we still considering having a town hall meeting at some point in the future?
We are, it may be on this issue.
Can I make a comment on that?
Yeah.
Because I think in the last meeting, Rob and Carol and John might be working on a governance revision something.
Yeah, we met over the weekend. Yeah.
I would not be supportive of anything coming out of it if we continue to avoid the town halls. We're moving towards a governance restructuring. And it was my understanding that if we're making some changes with committees,
That's a
there
good
would be
point.
an alternative method for people to communicate. And if we fail on that part, then they don't deserve having their ordinances restructured.
That's fair. That's fine. It may be the governance thing. So we'll have to see. I just,
After your term runs out.
I just remembered that. But Rob can still be there. He could be adding value. Any other committee thoughts?
I would like to just
Dietmar.
share Carol and my update on the McKenna Park Ad Hoc Committee.
Very
We have a
exciting.
town hall, I think it's our 8th standing ad hoc committee meeting, as well as our 2nd town hall meeting coming up next week.
What's the date on
Tuesday,
that?
3/4. And there will be 2 master plan options for consideration and comment for folks to comment on, so I invite you all to be there. It's at 7 PM. And depending on how that meeting goes, there might be a final recommendation that would come before the committee at the end of March, at their regular scheduled meeting. And if for some good grace, we get to a point that we can recommend this up to the board, it would be on the April agenda for the board to consider a final McKenna Park master plan.
I watched,
If not, it'll be hopefully in May.
yeah, I watched the rec meeting and there's some exciting proposals and ideas for what could happen in McKenna. So I'm looking forward to the town hall.
What do you anticipate it would just be to adopt a plan, that would be the only step the board would take at that point, and not dealing with any of the implications and the implementation, if you will, of it's just,
That is
this is,
correct.
let's just approve the plan.
Yeah, exactly.
Okay.
It's a master plan. The board has entrusted the ad hoc committee with going through a rigorous process and coming out on the tail end with a plan to adopt. So you may not meddle in that plan
So we have to-
unless you participate in the public meetings.
Okay, so, and then the next step would be, what is that, what are the implications of that?
Then exactly. How do you roll?
How do
this
we
out?
implement?
Yeah.
Okay, yeah. great.
Any other committee comments? That's helpful. Rob?
I'll just say something briefly, just because it has come to the board a couple of times, these no turn on red signs. You
Yeah.
may have gotten some comments about that. So that is something that the Public Works Committee discussed at our last meeting.
Yeah.
We talked about why Carl Franz permitted the city to install them at the BRT sites, as the city has done it, essentially all the other BRT sites. We talked about some other options, whether we should do certain
Electronic.
hours or electronic boards. Consensus of the committee was to let it play out for a while, so to see how the system is working and re-examine the issue later on this
Okay.
year, so.
But Rob, did we retain control over those issues? I mean, we've just approved tonight
I'll make a sudden
the
jump.
agreement on the operation and maintenance of traffic control signs and street lights. So did we just approve?
We've had lots of discussions with the city of Madison engineers, and they've been very willing to work with us about timing of light signals. If there's backups, that's feedback that we can give to Brian and he can relay that to the engineers. I've had conversations where the engineer's like, oh, let me check on the cam real quick and see what you're talking about. Like they have instant access to what's going on at all these intersections. And they're totally willing to tweak the dials to make sure everything's working smoothly.
Yeah, that they're good guys. I just didn't know as a practical matter, push
Yeah.
comes to shove. This, approving this agreement means they have the final say. Even though those things are in the village proper.
Mhm.
Yeah, okay, so I just want to make sure we recognize that we don't have the final say. Okay.
We're gonna move to future agenda items, or Carol?
Oh, just real quick.
Yep.
On behalf of Parks, I guess, and also the Garden Club, there's gonna be the Bird City event here, the annual one tomorrow night on owls. There'll probably be more people in this room than ever happens all year long.
When is that?
Tomorrow at 7.
I know.
Shit.
Yeah.
tomorrow.
So just FYI,
7 o'clock.
yep. 6:30 if you want cookies.
Who will be here?
It'll be a hoot, as
Yeah.
said by David Boutwell.
There's also a card going around, for Scott Harrington's family. If you haven't had a chance to sign it, I want to see it. Just want to mention that real quick. Any future agenda items we need to comment on or add?
I have maybe one referendum,
Ooh,
like not to add it. You don't have to add it. But should we add it? How do we make that? How do we have that conversation?
What referendum do you have in mind?
Well, we need more funds to support
You
the
mean
police
The tax
department.
levy
Yeah,
referendum,
yeah,
raise it.
that's
I
what
think
I'm-
the issue Julie said is that we can't do it in 2025. That any referendum which we were to arrange, it wouldn't be until effective in terms of actually getting additional tax receipts until 2027. So we're on our own next year, so that may,
Okay,
so I don't think we're in a big hurry because
Okay.
there isn't a lot we can do. We're stuck.
okay. Well, that's helpful.
Okay.
We would have to have it by April 1st.
but by then we'll also have a financial model
There
in
you
place.
go. That will solve all the
We-
problems.
We will have a financial model in place too, that's gonna help us figure this out and make that decision. But that's a big can of worms when you open it, as we know.
Do you want to add it to the list?
Don't add it, don't add it. No.
There we go.
That's something you might want to add is we should have an audit presentation by Baker Tilly
I
on
thought
the
you were gonna say turkeys.
2024
What's that?
results, on the 2024 results.
We do have that scheduled for May.
Oh, you've got it already
go.
penciled in for May.
Okay, does that work?
Okay.
Anything else? Motion
We
to
had a
adjourn?
Turkey shooting contest.
We'll make that.
Thank you, Kumar. There a second, Rob?
8:00. You bring yours, I'll bring mine.
All those in favor of
We'll call the
adjournment? Thank you. So I was gonna tell the turkey story. We had a very aggressive